Chapter 95. Pregnant. The emperor had become angry at court, the officials underneath were all shaking. But some were very envious of the Tian family. To have this kind of niece, it was really the good fortune from the previous life. He Yuan still attended court, but due to the case of Jiang Nan, he didn't have much power to meddle in other affairs. Hearing the officials beside him discuss the relationship between the imperial couple, he revealed a scornful smile. In this world, how many men had a love as deep as the ocean, and how many emperors could be like the Yuming emperor of the previous dynasty? Before the He family took the country, the world was ruled by the Tong family, and Yuming emperor had been a rare good ruler in the previous dynasty. This person had done something that was famous in the world. That was, his palace only had his empress, and no other woman. Many people had written their own versions of the love story between Yuming emperor and Zhao He empress. The stories were happy or sad, touching and wishful, but in all of them, they praised the infatuation of Ming Yu emperor and his wisdom, as well as the virtues and intelligence of Zhao He empress. People always had a shortcoming. The rarer something was, the more they liked to tell of it. The fact that there was so much written about Yuming emperor and Zhao He empress, wasn't it because an emperor's true love and monogamy were rare? Thinking of it, the smile on He Yuan's face grew wide. How many Yuming emperors were there in this world? After He Hing left the court, he started to walk towards the rear hall of Tian Qi Palace. As he walked, the coldness on his face retreated to become warm. When he reached the entrance to the rear hall, it seemed normal. The Taijian guarding the door saw him, and was going inside to report before being stopped. Ming He, go pass on Jin's decree. Summon the dean of the imperial hospital to take the pulse of the empress. He took the step into the door as he finished. Chu Qingju felt that as she traveled into this era, her hobbies became more and more elegant. Reading, calligraphy, flower arrangement, pruning, poetry, painting. She had done all of them. It was a pity that she could never have a sustaining interest in any of the hobbies. Disinterestedly looking at the bonsai that had been trimmed by her into a mushroom shape, she sighed, there's nothing to play with this bonsai. Mu Jin knew that the empress was bored. In the Hogong, aside from the Feipin and noblewomen coming to pay their respects, it was the people of the Department of Internal Affairs coming to ask about the matters of the palace. After a time, it wasn't interesting. Empress, Nubi saw the chrysanthemums in the imperial gardens have bloomed. Why don't we summon some noblewomen into the palace to keep you company and admire the flowers? It would pass the time. Mu Jin suggested, this way, it can also decrease the distance from you to them. Chu Qingju sighed. No wonder when she had searched for historical information in her previous life, there would always be some woman riding a horse, woman toying with a cat, and scenes of parks and kickball. It was because an idle life was too one-note, and the crowds of Miss Perfects needed to find things to pass the time. But the relationship between the empress and the wives of the officials was important. The emperor was the boss of the men of the world, therefore the empress was the boss of the women of the world. If there weren't any interactions, it wouldn't be right. A light, Ben Gong knows. 3 days from now, summon the wives above third rank into the palace to attend a banquet to admire the chrysanthemums. Chu Qingju pondered for a second, if there are unmarried daughters in the family, they can bring them as well. Yes, Nubi will go to let the female official announce the decree. Mu Jin wholeheartedly plotted for Chu Qingju. Any matter that was advantageous for Chu Qingju, she would cleanly and nimbly do, and wouldn't leave any blemishes. Just as she turned, she saw the emperor walk in. She quickly retreated to one side and knelt down, proclaiming, Nubi greets emperor. Chu Qingju heard Mu Jin's voice and raised her head to see He Hing walk over, still wearing the gold dragon-patterned robe that he wore when at court. She stood, meeting him and asking, Emperor, why have you come right now? When I got off from court, I remembered that a Tai was being summoned today to see your pulse and came to take a look. He held her hand to sit down on an armchair at the side. Seeing the bonsai that seemed to be almost bare, he smiled and remarked, "Just now on the outside, I heard you want to have a banquet. Is it because the Hogong is boring?" Chu Qingju smiled, a bit duller than at the Wang Fu. "But it will slowly get better. It probably won't happen this year, but next year, I will take you out." He touched her, sighing, "If you are really bored, you can summon Tian Foran in to talk with you, don't shut yourself in." All right, Chu Qingju felt that the other thought of her as a lonely and weak white flower. She smiled helplessly, responding, "Emperor doesn't have to be so worried. I'm the Empress. If I'm bored, the servants would naturally think of ways to make me happy." He knew that what she said was true, and a grimace appeared. Treating her like this, he really couldn't rest his worries. This was what it felt like to have your heart tied up with someone. A while later, Minghe came in to report that the dean of the Imperial Hospital had arrived. Chu Qingju saw a 60-something man come in wearing the official uniform of the Imperial Hospital. A fine sweat was on his forehead. He must have hurried over. Otherwise, in this early autumn, where would the sweat come from? Subject Du Bai Zhu Shu greets Emperor, greets Empress. It was possible to know from the name that he came from a family of medical practitioners. Chu Qingju silently examined the Tai. His cheeks were red, his hair was salt and pepper, but his overall energy was good. He must have taken very good care of his own health. Du Tai doesn't have to be so courteous. You have been in the Imperial Hospital for many years and very experienced. Recently, the Empress' appetites have increased. Come to take the pulse of the Empress and see if there are any ailments. He looked at Du Baizhu kneeling and indicated for him to come near to take Chu Qingju's pulse. When Du Baizhu heard the two words increased appetite, he paused. Then after thanking, he bowed and walked in front of Chu Qingju, holding his hands up and apologizing, "Empress, subject offends." Finishing, he took a silk cloth from his sleeve to place over Chu Qingju's wrist and started to take Chu Qingju's pulse. 5 minutes later, Du Baizhu switched to his other hand, and then Chu Qingju saw his expression become joyful. Du Baizhu took away the silk cloth over Chu Qingju's wrist, his face full of joy as he knelt in front of He. "Congratulations, Emperor, congratulations, Emperor. The Empress has a slippery pulse, it is a happy occasion." Chu Qingju's eyebrows jumped. Slippery pulse. Did he mean she was pregnant? Really? He, who didn't usually express his emotions, asked in surprise, "Can you tell how many months?" Because the pulse isn't very evident, it shouldn't be more than a month. Unless the Tai had practiced for many years, it would have been unlikely to detect the pulse. Du Baizhu's face was full of delight, as though he was happier than anyone else that the Empress was pregnant. But at the same time, he didn't forget to compliment himself. Good, good. By this time, He was grinning from ear to ear. He waved his hand, "Reward, heavily reward. This subject thanks Emperor, thanks Empress." Du Baizhu gasped at his luck inside. The Empress' pulse wasn't evident, but it was definitely pregnancy. This time, he really showed his face in front of the Emperor and Empress. If this matter had occurred with Xiandi, he would have been shuddering with fear. But now, the Hogong was managed by the Empress and the Emperor only favored the Empress. He had nothing to worry about. It was a very good thing. From today onwards, you don't have to attend anyone else, just serve the Empress, he mused as he barely managed to suppress his joy. From the Imperial Hospital, you can pick 2 trusted people to be your assistants. The diet of the Empress, Jin will get a pregnancy mama to pay more attention. If there is anything that cannot be used, you have to tell the pregnancy mama. Jin requires you to guarantee that Empress and the child in her stomach will be absolutely safe. Chen will not fail Emperor's trust. Du Baizhu gave a kowtow. Wealth could only be found through danger. If he could serve the Empress well this time, his status in the Imperial Hospital would be unshakable. After Du Tai left, Chu Qingju finally looked in disbelief at He Hing. "I'm pregnant." The palace maids and Tai Jian in the room were all kneeling with happy faces as they gave their congratulations. For them, the fact that the Empress had children, it was a good thing to them. Only when their mistress was well, would they, as servants, be well. "Yes, you have our child." The smile on He Heng's face hadn't disappeared. His hand cautiously touched Chu Qingju's belly. As though afraid of harming the child, he quickly jerked his hand back. "Tomorrow, I'll pick a useful and trusted pregnancy mama to serve you. Don't worry about any other matters, I'm there for everything else. Then the affairs of the Hogong, I'll hand over to the two Muhu." Chu Qingju wasn't attached to the power of the Hogong. Even more, with He Heng's heart here, she would always be the first in the Hogong. If He Heng didn't treat her well, it was useless even if she kept a grip on the power of the Hogong. "Right, I have to tell the two Muhu," He Heng thought. "Take a good rest, I'll be back quickly. I'll eat the noon meal with you." Chu Qingju gaped at He Heng as he rushed out of the room, appearing to float in the air. She shook her head in helplessness and then gave a faint smile. Empress Dowager Wei and Muhu Empress Dowager had been chatting together when they saw the emperor rush in. They were surprised, but seeing that his face was full of joy, the two were very happy, and also smiled. "Muhu, just now, the Tai took the pulse and found Empress is pregnant." He Heng was happy and sketched a bow to the two. "This son is coming to announce the good news." It had been a long time since Empress Dowager Wei saw her son forget appearances. She even felt that her son's eyes had become brighter. Her heart warming, she smiled, replying, "Since that's the case, you should be keeping Qingju company. Us here, it's fine to let someone else report." This son was just too happy and forgot. He Heng curbed himself slightly, but from each strand of his hair to his feet, jubilation was written in large font. "This son has also come to ask a certain favor. Aijia had expected that you were here about the management of the Hogong." Hearing it, Muhu Empress Dowager smiled. "Aijia had managed the Hoyong for decades, and doesn't want to suffer again. If you care for your wife, then beg your Muhu. Aijia isn't willing to meddle." Hearing this, Empress Dowager Wei responded, "Jijia is making things difficult for me. I haven't managed such things before. How about Mimi will temporarily work, but can ask Jijia for help every day. After our Urxifu has given birth, then let her manage herself. Us too, being Muhu, might want to be lazy but still have to care for the younger generation." "That's fine," Muhu Empress Dowager smiled, agreeing. "After our big grandson comes out, we only have to care about grandson." Naturally, He Heng gave his profuse thanks. As to the two Empress Dowagers expressing explicitly that they would only manage until the Empress gave birth, he understood the two's desire. Leaving Fu Shou Palace, He Heng got the Department of Household Affairs to present more good things to the palaces of the two Empress Dowagers to express his gratefulness. Empress Dowager Wei looked at the things that He Heng let others deliver and smiled helplessly. As a mother, she wouldn't bear to see her child in difficulty. The peace of the Hogong, to an emperor, it was an important matter. Chapter 96. The news that the Empress was pregnant quickly traveled from the Hogong to the court. On the second day, many officials' wives sent congratulatory messages to the rear hall of Tianqi Palace, expressing the joy the entire court felt towards the pregnancy of the Empress. Chu Qingju carelessly flipped open a note. The main idea was that the entire court heard that the Empress was pregnant and couldn't contain their joy, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep and had to write of their joy, and wrote a whole pile of good wishes before finishing with greetings to the Empress Dowager, Emperor, Empress etc. etc. The content of the messages weren't different, but what they expressed was the same. It was, "Us common people, we're happy today." Chu Qingju knew that the people had been keeping watch over her belly. If she gave birth to a son, it was the eldest son. In the future, even if the other Fapine had children, they couldn't shake the eldest son's position. Thinking of her body now, which was only 16, and was raising another little life, she felt complicated. And then she couldn't help but have another bowl of rice. The Empress Dowagers of the two palaces had already let the servants deliver a whole pile of useful and useless things over. Especially Empress Dowager Wei. She seemed to want to stuff the rear hall of Tianqi Palace full, sending over pile after pile of stuff. Chu Qingju started to wonder if Empress Dowager Wei still had anything left in her personal stores. Empress, Jean and Princess had someone send congratulatory gifts into the palace. Wang Yang held a list as he entered, which he gave into Chu Qingju's hand. Her Highness Princess Royal also said to wait until the flower banquet tomorrow to have a good chat with you. Chu Qingju flipped the list. The things listed avoided stuff that might cause trouble. It could be seen that Jean and Princess Royal had the intentions to become closer but was worried of getting into trouble. Putting the list to one side, Chu Qingju smiled. Go tell the messenger, say that Ben Gong will remember and to let Jean and Princess come early tomorrow. Jean and Princess Royal and her, originally it had been half friendship, half beneficial. The way they interacted now, it was the best. Jean and Princess Royal might be female, but Chu Qingju felt that she was very decisive in her conduct. When she had separated from the Count of Beilu, she was unhesitating and didn't show any weakness. In the end, she had protected the reputations of the princess of the imperial house, and captured titles for her children. In reality, if the Princess Royal and the Count of Beilu hadn't separated, her children might not have the same rank as they did now. After that, Jean and Princess expressed goodwill to He Heng and clearly distanced herself from Lao De and Lao San's family. The action seemed reckless, but it was much easier to obtain the good opinion of He Heng that way. No one liked people who backstabbed. In the very end, Jean and Princess Step was right. Now, she was the most free, most important princess, the Princess Royal, of all of Xiandi's daughters. Even if she didn't have a Fuma now, Huan Jing would underestimate her. A woman as skilled as her, it was no wonder that an emperor as unjust as Qing the Emperor was soothed by her to not care about traditions and make her the Princess Royal. Even Chu Qingju herself didn't think she could do as well. Empress, Qing Wangfu sent gifts. Empress, the Duchess of Zhongyi sent gifts. Chu Qingju spent the whole morning looking at different lists. She sighed. It wasn't an insignificant number of officials' wives that were qualified to send gifts to her. She didn't know how much had been just placed into the stores without a word. Empress, Rui Wangfu sent gifts. The presents from Rui Wangfu came relatively late. Chu Qingju had been preparing to use the noon meal when the people delivered it. She casually flipped open the list and was slightly shocked. Did Qin Bailu really prepare this for her? 1,000-year ginseng, Tian Shan snow lotus, 100-year knotweed and so on. Things like cultivating bangles and other valuable objects had been stuffed in. When she finished reading the list, Chu Qingju felt that Qin Bailu wouldn't be this good to her. Something along the line wasn't right. Who sent this list? Chu Qingju folded up the list in her hand, her brow furrowing as she asked. Ben Gong has always been at odds with Qin Bailu. When has she been so good to me? Empress, you are the empress now. How can Rui Wangfei compete against you now? Huang Yang responded, this list was personally sent by the steward of Rui Wangfu, He Fu Heir. It shouldn't be wrong. Right now, the emperor is investigating the old case of Jiangnan. Rui Wang sending so much over, he must have other intentions. Chu Qingju just remembered that the court was in the middle of the case of Jiangnan. Rui Wangfu sending so much over, were they thinking for her to have some pillow talk? That was funny. She, an empress that the emperor put importance on, would be stupid enough, for just this paltry amount of stuff, to go beg for mercy for Rui Wang, wasn't that was seeking suicide, being tired of living? The matter was overlapping with the court, so the servants attending Chu Qing-ju cleverly didn't follow up. This was a quality that Chu Qing-ju was satisfied with. In this world, no one liked other people saying things they shouldn't by their ear. In the imperial study of Tianqi Palace, He Hing finished reading the memorandum on the case of Jiang Nan, his face grave as he drummed his fingers. A long time later, he ordered, "Summon the Duke of Zhongyi for an audience." When Tianjin Ku came to Tianqi Palace, He Hing had finished all of the memorandums on the desk. Seeing him come in, he called, "Beloved official, Tian doesn't have to be courteous. Zhen has called you today to discuss the matter of Rui Wang." Tianjin Ku hesitated before replying, "The evidence has been conclusive for the case of Jiang Nan. This subject doesn't know what the emperor means. In his life Xiandi liked Zhen Sandy the most, so Zhen doesn't want his life. But the case is truly frightening. Zhen, as a ruler, cannot tolerate such things to happen," he sighed. "It's hard to fulfill both righteousness and loyalty." Hearing that the emperor had spoken to such lengths, Tianjin Ku couldn't even pretend to not understand. He immediately responded, "Rui Wang's crimes are serious, but these cases were committed mostly by his subordinates who couldn't not moderate themselves and are not directly linked with Rui Wang. Wei Qin thinks that Rui Wang is guilty but not guilty of death. Then you say, how should Zhen determine Rui Wang's crimes?" He Hing looked at Tianjin Ku below, mocking, "At the very least, he is Zhen's brother. Zhen doesn't bear for him to live too bleakly for the rest of his life." Tianjin Ku's heart jumped, fine sweat dotting his forehead. The emperor, at such an age, had such a manner. It was truly shocking. This subject doesn't know. "Fine, Zhen won't bother you." He Hing didn't keep going at the question. His tone suddenly became light. "Now Empress is pregnant. She had always been close to your Furen. In the future, if your Furen doesn't have any major matter, then come to the palace to keep the Empress company." Hearing the emperor mention such a matter, Tianjin Ku naturally happily complied. His niece was still very young. As an elder, he was happy she was pregnant and could steady her position as empress, but was worried she would be inexperienced and become worried and frightened due to pregnancy. "Zhen doesn't have anything else. You are excused," He Hing said with a faint smile. Tianjin Ku saw the relaxed expression on the emperor's face as though he wasn't affected by the case of Jiang Nan and left unworried. When he passed through the gates of Tianqi Palace, he thought in puzzlement, did the emperor only summon his to ask about the matter of Rui Wang? But why did he feel that it wasn't right? In Rui Wang Fu, Yuan raised a wine cup to take a sip. He looked lazily at Gao Duo on his side, whose face was full of worry. He smiled, asking, "What? Ben Wang isn't worried, but why are you even more uneasy than Ben Wang?" "Wang Yi, now that the evidence for the Jiang Nan case has all been presented to the emperor, if the emperor would try to take your life, you have no way out," Gao Duo sighed, suggesting, "Why don't we think of another way?" "Think of what?" Yuan snorted, "If he wants to kill, then kill. The winner as king, the loser as outlaw. Now that he is the emperor, even if he didn't have the evidence of the Jiang Nan case, he could still easily sort me out. But has Wang Yi thought of the people on the Fu, and Shu Gui Taifei still waiting for you to receive her out of the palace? If you get in trouble, what about them?" Gao Duo sighed. "Don't worry, He Hing wants to settle accounts with me, but the hypocrite he is, definitely won't leave behind a bad name. The lives of everyone in this Fu will remain." Yuan lowered his face, throwing his head back to drink to the bottom of the cup. "Even more, the Empress is now pregnant. He wouldn't bear to start killing." "How did the matter relate to the Empress?" Gao Duo looked in puzzlement at Yuan. Seeing that his face wasn't pleasant, he didn't dare to use the emperor's name and responded, "If that's the case, Wang Yi, why don't you take advantage of the chance and save yourself?" "I can't hide forever," He Yuan careless threw away the cup in his hand. Don't waste any more attention for Ben Wang. Ben Wang knows, you can leave. Gao Duo looked at the wine cup rolling on the floor and left in helplessness. When he came out of the gate, he saw Rui Wang Fei standing at the door, and lowered his head, making a greeting. Qin Bailu didn't pay attention to him. She only stared at the gate of the building, as though the person inside was an enemy of hers. Wang Fei. Ru Hua saw that Wang Fei's expression wasn't good and carefully urged, "It's cold in autumn, let's go back to the room." Now he doesn't even want me to meddle in the matters of Hoyuan, Qin Bailu grimaced as she spoke. Then her expression became malevolent. The congratulatory presents for the Empress pregnancy, he didn't even ask me, the Wang Fei, before sending it off. This Wang Fei that I am, what's the meaning? Juzi, don't be angry, let's return. Ru Hua reached to pull Qin Bailu. This was the doorway to the main building. What would happen if Wang Yi heard? Humph, Qin Bailu snorted, holding Ru Hua's hand as she left in discontent. It wouldn't matter if she didn't leave. By now, Wang Yi practically didn't go to her rooms, and didn't let her enter his. Chapter 97 Overestimating Oneself at Court. As the speaker recited the contents of the investigation, the officials listened with wide eyes and gaping mouths. They didn't think Rui Wang would have committed so many crimes. Rui Wang, do you have anything to say? He Hing calmly looked at He Yuan standing below. When Fu Huang was alive, he was extremely good to you. Why did you have to commit such major crimes? If Emperor wants to kill Subject D, then do as you wish. There's no need to talk so much. He Yuan did not beg for mercy. His face was full of scorn as though He Hing, sitting at the top, was just a joke. If Fu Huang really cared for me, then I wouldn't be standing here today. By saying this much, you just want to proclaim me disloyal and unfilial. Zhen has never thought that way. He Hing sighed. We were almost born at the same time, and had played together as children. Zhen doesn't bear to kill you. Even more so, many of the acts were committed by your subordinates, and aren't seriously connected to you. He Yuan furrowed his brows and then sneered. He wanted to see how He Hing would deal with him. The officials looked at the expressions of the two brothers. On one hand, they were moved by the feelings of the emperor, on the other, they felt helpless at Rui Wang's arrogance. Rui Wang had been arrogant and despotic in Jing for many years. Even now, with such undeniable evidence, he was still so unmanageable. Pass Shin's decree. Rui Wang exhibited unruly behavior, and forfeits his salary for 5 years. He allowed his subordinates to smuggle salt, and buy and sell official posts and titles. Zhen hurts at heart, but as Xiandi once told Zhen to hold fraternal affection, Zhen doesn't bear to but still has to punish. From this day forth, Rui Wang cannot enter court, is demoted from Qin Wang to Jun Wang, deprived of his salary for 5 years, and will write a list of his own crimes to be posted on the city gates of all the regional capitals of Jiangnan. The wealth that was seized from the Jiangnan case will not be taken into the treasury. Zhen will personally send it to Jiangnan so it can be used to fix roads and construct bridges in order to benefit the people of Jiangnan. He Hing had a disappointed face as he stood. Qin can all leave. The emperor is wise. This subject asks to be excused. Everyone knelt to send the emperor off, becoming even more respectful of the new emperor. The emperor did not take Rui Wang's life, did not erase him from the imperial house's lineage. That was due to fraternal love. The emperor punished Rui Wang, used the wealth seized to construct infrastructure for Jiangnan, and asked for him to write his own apology letter to post on the gates of Jiangnan cities. It was so the emperor didn't want to fail the people. It really was a win all around, with no flaws. This move seemed to look as though it was protecting Rui Wang, but on reflection, it was actually stomping Rui Wang to the ground. A Wang Yi who couldn't attend court, a Wang Yi who wrote his own crimes to present to the world. He wasn't a risk, and would become a blemish in history. In the future, people would most likely praise the emperor for being loyal and righteous. A ruler with such cunning, as subjects, they naturally had to be more cautious in their work. If they made the emperor angry, even in death, they may not have a good name. He Yuan quietly stood in the empty grand hall. The emperor on the dragon chair had left, the officials beside him had also left. He looked calmly at the surroundings. A long time later, he smiled lightly, "To kill without a trace, as expected of my good brother." "Your Highness," the little Taijian who guarded the great hall carefully walked in front of him and informed in a small voice, "It's closing time." Looking at the Taijian whose legs were quivering, He Yuan smiled, "What, Ben Wang is very frightening." The young Taijian knelt with a bang and started to kowtow, pleading, forgive me, Wang Yi." "All right, stand up." He Yuan didn't look at the Taijian as he walked to the doorway leading into the hall. When he turned back, he saw the Taijian was still kowtowing, and laughed out loud, "Don't be afraid, Ben Wang won't ever stand here again." The Taijian froze. A beat later when he dared to look towards the doorway, he only saw the shining sun outside. Rui Wang had disappeared. He patted his knees as he stood, mumbling to himself, "Still thinks he's the same Rui Wang, such arrogance." The Hogong was very busy at the moment because Chu Qingju had invited the wives of officials third grade and up into the palace. Those who couldn't get out of the bed were the only ones in Jing who couldn't come. This was the first time the Empress had invited the titled women into the palace. No matter what the Empress was intent on doing, the people under didn't dare to slight her. Some thought that since the Empress was pregnant, she wanted to pick daughters from the families of officials to enter the palace as Fae to serve the emperor. However, those who wanted to seize the opportunity took along the unmarried daughters of their family, and smart people came alone, unwilling to even mention their daughters. Which woman in this world wanted to find other women to share their husband? Disregarding the fact that the Empress hadn't known she was pregnant when she had sent out the decree, even if she had known, based on the affection between Emperor and Empress, they wouldn't benefit if they sent their daughters in, and would offend the Empress instead. They also should think about where the Empress was living now. It was rumored that the Emperor had disliked the smell due to the new renovation of Kuei Yuan Palace and specially made a decree that, until a month after the Empress has given birth, she was not to move out of the rear hall of Tianqi Palace. The wife and the husband were living together. For a Xia to blindly interfere, wasn't that just begging for punishment? Chu Qingju didn't feel any different even though she was now pregnant. When she reached the imperial gardens in her phoenix carriage, the people who should have come had arrived. Once she got out, the crowd knelt. "Furen, don't be so courteous. Please rise." Chu Qingju looked at the different varieties of chrysanthemums placed in the garden. She smiled, teasing, "Ben Gong has met you all before. Furen, don't be restrained with Ben Gong just because the location has changed." The wives gave their thanks and sat down according to their ranks. Very quickly, Taijian started to place rare chrysanthemums onto the pedestal previously constructed in the middle for the women to see. Each pot of chrysanthemums would be brought up for a time, and then the next one would be even more beautiful. No matter if they were really amazed or just acting, they continuously gave their compliments, as though the chrysanthemums weren't of mortal hands and had been given down from the gods. Chu Qingju slowly drank a cup of date tea. She wasn't allowed to drink any other kind, not even ginseng. Red date tea was the only tea that was good for her and the embryo, so she had gradually started to change her diet. "This one is interesting." Chu Qingju pointed at a pot of flowers where the back was white, and the inside was purple. She had once had such a flower, but she never knew the name. Because of her busy job, she never spent much time caring for it, and the flower, once it bloomed, wasn't as beautiful. "Empress, this chrysanthemum is called the fragrant young phoenix. Because the petals are as beautiful as a phoenix, so it received this name." The Taijian that had been holding the flower answered with joy. Originally, he had thought that this pot wasn't eye-catching and thus wouldn't receive the favor of the Empress. Who knew that it was the only one the Empress would ask about? It was a blessing from the ancestors. Fragrant young phoenix. Chu Qingju mused for a second, that's a good name. Mu Jin, reward. After seeing the Empress admire that flower, the wives followed in complimenting it, making this somewhat commonplace flower become rare. This female subject has only seen chrysanthemums in the books, the plum blossoms are jealous of its fragrance. Today, borrowing the good fortune of Empress to view so many chrysanthemums, it is really this female subject's luck. A girl wearing a light yellow short dress said in a moderately loud voice, the golden dragon leaping clouds was also extremely beautiful. Chu Qingju looked at the person who spoke. It was a girl, about 15 or 16. She had a simple shuang ping ji, but that made her seem even more youthful. For Zhen, that jade phoenix cloud was the most beautiful. He Hing, followed by a crowd of attendants, walked towards the direction where Chu Qingju was standing. He looked at the girl who spoke. Whose family are you? This female subject is the granddaughter of Grand Duke Jing, Qin Chao Yun, greets Emperor. The young girl saw the Emperor inquire and stood with a calm face. She gave a full bow to He Hing. This female subject spoke nonsense, and let the Emperor hear a joke. Chu Qingju saw Qin Chao Yun's elegant posture and gave a small smile. Wasn't Grand Duke Jin Qin Bailu's grandfather, then wasn't Qin Chao Yun, Qin Bailu's sister or cousin? But the looks, the conduct, it was more pleasing than Qin Bailu. "And, you spoke too much," He Hing calmly concluded, "there's so many elders present, there's no reason for you, as one of the younger generation, to speak." Qin Chao Yun seemed shocked that the Emperor would say such a thing to her. She stilled, then with a normal expression, she responded, "The teachings of Emperor, this female subject will remember in her heart." And this conduct was much better than Qin Bailu. If a normal person had been admonished by the Emperor like this, she would have been read all over. But she acted as though the Emperor was teaching for her benefit. Chu Qingju sighed. It looked like the Qin family did have some women with high attack power. Qin Bailu and Wei Ranlu's mother only counted as the failures of the Qin family. He Hing felt a bit surprised. He couldn't help but look again at Qin Chao Yun. She didn't seem to have deliberately dressed up, but her appearance gave others a feeling of elegance. It didn't stain the Qin family's reputation. When his gaze fell upon a pair of pearl-embroidered slippers, he took away his gaze, his voice even colder. "Shen isn't instructing you, but reminding you. At the very least, you were born of an educated and noble family, so your conduct cannot stain the reputations of the noble families." Everyone could hear that the Emperor didn't seem to like the Qin family. They remembered that Rui Wang's Wang Fei was a daughter of the Qin family, and didn't have a good relationship with the Empress. They instantly understood. This Qin family had married a daughter to Rui Wang Fu. The result was that Rui Wang fell. So they wanted to shove a daughter into the palace. They really did think everyone else was stupid and couldn't see what they wanted. Some of the foreign examined Qin Chao Yun's appearance and thought scornfully, "Just these looks, and she wanted to seduce the Emperor. Could she even compare to a finger of the Empress?" The Duchess of Zhongyi, Tian Luoshi, took a sip from a teacup, uncaringly commenting, "The reputation of the daughters of the Qin family is good, but the rare ones who haven't learned well, it's of no benefit to their reputation." The people beside her, hearing it, instantly agreed, provoking the Duchess Dowager of Jing's face to pale in anger. He Hing didn't look at the women, turning to walk towards Chu Qingju. "Look at the time, the flower banquet should be finishing now." Chapter 98. As He Hing walked up to her, Chu Qingju prepared to stand and properly greet him but was stopped when he gently pushed on her shoulder. "There's no need, Zhen just came from Muhu's palace, and came here to take a look. Hearing that, Chu Qingju responded, it had been planned for Muhu to also come here, but who knew that the two of them would say that due to the complexity of the palace affairs, they wouldn't be able to attend this flower banquet. As she spoke, a hint of guilt appears on her face, as though it was her fault that the two Empress Dowagers were so busy. You're pregnant now and it's not necessary to do those burdensome matters, He Hing smiled as he sat down beside her, both Muhu will understand. Towards the two Empress Dowagers, he was confident of their abilities. Earlier, he had asked the Tai. They said that during a woman's pregnancy, she can't be exhausted, and can't be angry, or else it would harm the body and the child. That was a big no-no. Hearing He Hing say so, Chu Qingju smiled, this is escaping from frustration into relaxation. Even though he was sitting at the front of a crowd of women, He Hing wasn't the slightest bit unsettled. He even managed to disregard the womenfolk sitting below, full of ease as he chatted with Chu Qingju about some small matters, acting as though the other people were also pots of flowers. Using a gap in the conversation, Chu Qingju looked down. All of the womenfolk seemed to be comfortably engaging in conversation with those beside them. The atmosphere hadn't cooled because the emperor had arrived. They tried very hard to make the emperor feel welcomed. Chu Qingju felt that she couldn't waste the time of the womenfolk present and said, originally, everyone was to stay for a meal before leaving, but Ben Gong is pregnant. The Tai has reminded many times not to sit long in the first 3 months, so today, we won't keep everyone. To have neglected everyone so, Ben Gong hopes for everyone's understanding. The womenfolk who had children stood in succession, thanking the Empress for inviting them as they mentioned that it was important to be careful in the first trimester. They also said that the Empress and the embryo inside were full of good fortune, and would smoothly coast and meet auspicious events along the way. Chu Qingju smiled and let them leave. Before they left, she took another look at Qin Chaoyun. A pretty beautiful young girl. She knew how to show herself off. But it was a pity that she wore such plain clothes, but her slippers exposed her true nature. If a person had to act, then they had to make it more realistic. Except for the normal hairpins, the plain clothing, how could she forget about her slippers? The embroidered shoes of unmarried girls were frequently changed. Especially the kind that were encrusted with agate or pearls. Because it wasn't easy to clean, the pearls and agate would fall apart or the color would be wrong. So after they wore it once, they wouldn't wear it again. This caused families who didn't have the wealth to not frequently wear that kind of slippers. This was where Qin Chaoyun had failed. If she had really preferred plain adornments, why would she wear that kind of slippers? She might have had some schemes, some bravery, but was still too inexperienced. It wasn't enough in front of He Hing. Jean and Princess Royal had originally planned to privately talk with Chu Qingju after the banquet. But seeing the emperor protect her so, she felt she didn't need to say those things and smiled as she left with the other womenfolk. After the womenfolk left, the two of them returned to Tianqi Palace to eat. Each dish was tested by a Taijian before they started to eat. The meat and vegetables of the dishes were perfectly complementing and all of them were beneficial to a pregnant mother and her child. Chu Qingju didn't like how the dishes became slightly less flavorful but still ate a lot. After the meal, He Hing went to the front hall. Chu Qingju leaned back on the recliner, calmly asking, the people who brought their daughters into the palace, have you remembered all of them? Nyang Nyang, don't worry, Mu Jin put a thin blanket over her, there were only a few families who took their unmarried daughters into the palace, Nubi remembered them all. Chu Qingju nodded. She was confident in Mu Jin, the Qin family is very fortunate to still be an educated noble family. Doing what they have done, it doesn't look anything like what a noble family would do. She wasn't very clear about the Qin family, but based on what she knew about educated and literary families, weren't they elegant, respectful, modest yet not false? Why was it then, when it came to the Qin family, it seemed that they were ruining the reputation of all literary families. Wasn't that morally wrong? Empress, you might not know, Jean Jean, who usually had the most information, interjected. Nubi heard that the last Grand Duke Jing was a man of great character. Who knew that the heavens were jealous and he died before 30 without even a son? They could only pass the title to his Shudi's son, who is the present Grand Duke Jing. The Grand Duke Jing's personality is weak and usually listens to the Duchess of Jing. In the past, it wasn't visible, but the Qin family are more and more restless. If this continues, they might not be able to keep their label of a literary family. If that's the case, does it mean that the present Qin family isn't considered as orthodox? Yin Lu thought about how Rui Wang Fei acted, asking, since they aren't orthodox, Rui Wang Fei also acts like this. Yes, thinking about it this way, Rui Wang Fei's branch is Shu. Mu Jin gasped ruefully, no wonder Rui Wang Fei is like that. Even though she held a suspicious attitude regarding the division due to blood, Chu Qingju finally understood another matter. No wonder the conduct of the Qin family was so short-sighted. So the real decision-maker was a woman in the house. One had to know, in this time, no matter male or female, if they stayed in the home the entire time and didn't try to understand what was happening outside when they sent out orders, it was easy to make a wrong decision. The inner compound easily restricted a person's knowledge and judgment. When He Hing returned to the front hall, he abruptly dug out the list of the female candidates that the Department of Household Affairs had presented. Rui Wang's conduct has become confused. One of the causes is that Rui Wang Fei could not restrain him. Shen doesn't bear for Didi to have a person who doesn't serve him with the entire heart, and specially bestows some female candidates to serve in Rui Wang Fu in hopes their conduct can move Rui Wang. After speaking, he then circled 4 names from the listed 28, and let Qian Chang Xan leave with his words to send them to Rui Wang Fu. These 4 female candidates didn't seem to be of significance, but in reality, their paternal homes were all in Jing. Even though they weren't of exceptional families, they still had some standing in Jing City, and they had done some things which He Hing didn't like. So when he sent the 4 girls to Rui Wang Fu, he felt very good. He Hing put the list to one side. Right now, he didn't have any interest in taking a Fei. In the past, he felt that the variety of beautiful women by his side was flowers on the gold, but now he felt, regardless of how many there were, if they weren't satisfactory, they just took up space. Come, send down the order, bestow every one of the female candidates in Tuanfang Hall a pair of gold bangles for their dowry. 3 days later, they can return to their homes for marriage so they don't have to stay in the palace. By making such an order, the emperor was explicitly telling others he had no intentions of taking the female candidates as Feipin, so he's allowing them to go home to marry of their own initiative. The female candidates were sent home to marry on their own. The empress was pregnant, then who would serve the emperor? The people in the palace started to have thoughts, seemingly forgetting the lessons of the past. Qin Bailu listened to the servant's report on Chu Yuxu's sorry situation, her mood light. She rewarded a handful of copper to the clever-tongued Yahuan. Raising a teacup, she said to Ru Hua beside her, I just want to see, without Wang Ye's favor, how long she would survive. Ru Hua saw the mirth on Wang Fei's face and said helplessly, Wang Fei, Nubi heard that today at court, Wang Yi was. His matters has nothing to do with me. Qin Bailu smiled coldly. Right now, I can't even run the inner compound, much less what happens outside. Seeing Wang Fei's expression, Ru Hua understood. Wang Fei still might not know that Wang Yi had been demoted and banned from court. This matter was extremely serious. If Wang Fei's state was seen by Wang Yi, would there be another fight? Ben Wang's affairs naturally doesn't have anything to do with you, He Yuan strode in from outside. He didn't look at Qin Bailu and Ru Hua's expressions, and sat down at the front, faintly remarking, right now, your Qin family has put their hats for the emperor, how would they even look at Ben Wang? Qin Bailu's face instantly darkened. He Yuan's words were ugly, but it wasn't unsubstantiated. If he said it, then it meant that the Qin family really did want to arrange someone to enter the palace. He Yuan lightly laughed. You really believe your Qin family's daughters are goddesses that everyone falls in love? Your Qin family might not find it embarrassing, but Ben Wang feels embarrassed for you. His fingers gently tapped on the arm of the chair, mocking. Also, if you say that you have nothing to do with Ben Wang's affairs, why don't you pack up and go home? Ben Wang will definitely ask for a divorce from the emperor. Qin Bailu's heart jumped. She looked at He Yuan, trying to find even the slightest hint of humor on his face. But his face didn't seem to be joking. Wang Yi. Xia was personally decreed by Xiandi to be your Wang Fei. You cannot treat me this way, Qin Bailu stammered. You can't divorce Xia. Even if Xiandi was here, if Ben Wang wanted to divorce you, then it will happen. Even more so, now that Xiandi isn't here. He Yuan looked frigidly at her. Get out, Ben Wang doesn't want to see you. The rims of Qin Bailu's eyes reddened. She bowed and prepared to leave when she saw He Fu'er rush in, and then he said something which made it harder for her to endure. Why would the emperor bestow a few concubines down, and accuse her of not serving Wang Yi well? Qin Bailu felt that her face was burning like someone had slapped her, burning with pain. He Yuan didn't care for her, only ordering He Fu'er to lead the people over for him to take a look. Qin Bailu looked at He Fu'er as he trotted away. She felt as though a basin of cold water had poured over her, freezing her from head to toe. Chapter 99 Decay. The 4 candidates who had been bestowed by the emperor were all taken in. Only after they had become yin-yang did the people of the Wang Fu find out the shocking reality. Wang Yi had been demoted. Since he wasn't a Qin Wang anymore, the allowances in the Fu and the number of servants had to decrease. The size of the Wang Fu had to shrink, so some people were going to be thrown out. Just as the servants were worried for their future, they heard another piece of news. Wang Yi had been banned from court, and his salary was to be docked for 5 years. Additionally, he had to admit his crimes in writing to the public. The servants who had been reluctant to leave the palace weren't reluctant anymore. They waited for the notice to come so they could find a new employer. As for the Taijian and palace maids who had came out of the Department of Household Affairs, they wanted to go back to the department to be assigned again. They would rather find another master than to serve one who had no future. At the very least, anything would be better than now. Qin Bailu hadn't thought that such an event would happen. She listened to Ru Hua recite the happenings, and choked for a long time before stammering, "Didn't he want to divorce me? Now that he's like this, how can he divorce me?" Ru Hua sighed in helplessness. Not speaking of the ego that Wang Yi had, even if a normal person heard what Wang Fei had said, they would have been angry. In the beginning, when Wang Fei just entered the Wang Fu, she rashly sorted out the concubines in the Fu. When Wang Yi said a word, the two started to fight there and then, a subject of much mockery by the servants in the Fu. Now that it was like this, Wang Yi and Wang Fei had nothing to say to each other, and Wang Yi had lost power. Wang Fei should be thinking of how to comfort Wang Yi or secure the people of the Hoyuan. But she was rejoicing in the misfortune. To keep going like this, would there be any feelings left? Seeing Ru Hua wanting to speak but kept restraining herself, Qin Bailu uttered coldly, "Since Wang Yi doesn't want me to manage anything in the Wang Fu, then whatever happens in the Fu, I don't need to spend the effort for nothing. If anyone begs to see me, just say that I'm ill." Yes, Wang Fei. Having served Wang Fei for almost a decade, Ru Hua was clear about Wang Fei's personality. She wouldn't have appreciated any more conversation. She bowed and silently stood to one side. But Qin Bailu couldn't remain calm for too long. Because the Qin family had passed on the news that her cousin had been reproached by the emperor in front of all the noblewomen. Earlier, she had called in sick to avoid attending Chu Qingju's chrysanthemum banquet, so she hadn't thought such a thing would happen. Listening to the cause of the matter, Qin Bailu was irritated. No wonder Wang Yi would speak of her Qin family's daughters that way. So it had been because of this. It was also no wonder that her paternal family hadn't sent in their cards to her. So they had wanted to climb on the high branch that was the emperor. She was only a failed Wang Fei, what use did she have? After managing to clearly figure out the matter, Qin Bailu felt her heart becoming cold. Both her family and her husband were like this. She had no hope left in her life. Thinking about the pregnant Chu Qingju, she lowered her head to touch her own empty belly. She didn't understand why all the good things of the world happened to Chu Qingju. A good popo, a good husband, a good birth, even more, she would soon have a child. Who said that the heavens had eyes? Some people lived well and others didn't. Ru Hua, pass my orders, Chu Shi is seriously ill. To prevent her from infecting others, she will not live in Shisuyuan. Today, she will move to the Shiping Zhai in the western corner to recuperate. She didn't believe all the women of the Chu family would be lucky. Ru Hua heard Wang Fei's sinister order, and shook slightly. Nubi will send it down right now. Coming out of the Jingyuan, she looked at the large building and for some reason, felt a gust of cold enter from her back into her heart. Chu Yusu, who had been sick on the bed, watched as the servants of the Fu roughly pack up her things and piled them in the middle of the room. She hated Qin Bailu for being cruel and hated herself because she couldn't do anything to the loathsome servants. After the things in the room were packed up, one of the mamas came up and jerked off the blanket on her, coldly announcing, Chu Ce Fei, you should get up. Wang Fei has ordered for you to move to Shiping Zhai before midnight. Nubi will have to offend you here. She easily pulled Chu Yusu from the bed, who was dressed in her undergarments. Chu Yusu was seriously ill and couldn't tolerate her handling. Her body froze and she started to cough. As she covered her mouth, she looked hatefully at the mama, wanting to eat her flesh and break her bones. Su Fei, don't look like that at Nubi. Nubi isn't the one at fault, the mama waved her hand saying to the other Yahuan behind her, what are you doing standing there? Help Ce Fei change. When Yoshi carried a bowl of hot medicine to enter the Siyuan, she coincidentally saw Chu Yusu being pulled out of the room by two mamas, wearing a repulsive colored dress, her hair falling messily behind her back, cutting an extremely sorry figure. What are you doing to Ce Fei? She put the bowl onto the ground and tried to rush forward to push aside the mamas dragging Ce Fei. Yao Shigunyang, this is Wang Fei's order, you shouldn't interfere, the mama who was in command sneered. If you make a fuss, I can only assume you are angry at Wang Fei and deliberately opposing Wang Fei's command. Yao Shi stilled. She was panicked and angry as she went forward to support Chu Yusu, coldly asking, what do you mean mama, that it is Wang Fei's intention for Ce Fei not to be properly attired? The mama twisted her mouth and then responded, Yao Shigunyang should say less. I'm old and can't hear anything. She waved her hand for the servants to drag Chu Yusu away. Yao Shi could only follow. The Shiping Zhai's name was better than the room. Yao Shi knelt by the bed with red eyes, looking at her mistress who was unnaturally flushed, kowtowing as she said, Zhuzi, Nubi will ask for Wang Yi to come, Wang Yi will save you. There's no need to go, Wang Yi won't come. She looked at Yao Shi who was crying and hurt, smiling, don't cry, everyone has to make the journey. She had been ill originally, and after suffering such an ordeal, she wouldn't survive. Zhuzi, don't say that, you will get better. Yao Shi went forward to grasp Chu Yusu's hand, Nubi will go make medicine for you, you'll get better after eating it. Chu Yusu shook her head. In a daze, she seemed to have seen the beautiful lanterns at the riverside at the Lantern Festival, the bustling and tight crowds, and Chu Qingju and the emperor holding hands. She muttered, that originally belonged to me, it's mine Chu Qingju, why?" Her voice gradually grew smaller and finally faded in the silence of the room. Yao Shi looked at the motionless person on the bed and cried out loud. "Wang Fei, Chu Si Fei of Shi Ping Zhai has passed." Ru Hua entered the room and saw Wang Fei was reading a book by the window. She went forward to report in a small voice, "Yao Shi, the servant of Chu Si Fei, hopes to see Wang Yi." Qin Bai Lu flipped a page, her head not lifting as she rejected, "Let her go, beg He Fu Er, I can't make the decision." Ru Hua saw that Wang Fei didn't want to speak and could only retreat. Looking at Yao Shi waiting at the door, wearing plain clothing and her bright red and swollen eyes, she revealed a conflicted expression, not knowing how to tell her. Wang Fei said that she hasn't been in charge of the household recently. "If you want to see Wang Yi, then go find Chief Steward He." Ru Hua furtively looked at the surroundings and quickly stuffed a pouch filled with silver into Yao Shi's hands before acting normal as she returned to the Jingyuan. Yao Shi slowly stood up. Looking at the pouch in her hand, she walked blankly towards the main building. No matter what, Zhuzi had served Wang Yi for a length of time. Would he not even let the person be properly buried after death? He Yuan had a beautiful woman in his arms as she served him wine. As he became drunk, he let another beauty play the zither to raise his spirits. He drank until he was almost senseless, and couldn't even see clearly. Wang Yi, Chu Si Fei has passed away. He Fu Er reported at his side. Yao Shi, who served Si Fei, asks for an audience. "Who is Chu Si Fei?" He Yuan placed a kiss on the face of the beauty in his arms. As the woman laughed, he frowned. "Gone is gone, why tell Ben Wang?" Wang Yi, Chu Si Fei is Empress half-sister. He Fu Er saw that Wang Yi was drunk and could only pour tea as he added, "Many people are looking from the outside. No matter how it really was, they should make it appear better." The Mimi of the Empress, He Yuan pushed away the beauty in his arms, rubbing his forehead to clear his mind. He took a long draw of the tea He Fu Er handed over. "If that's the case, then make sure the servants won't slight her, and bury according to protocol." Not slighting yet according to protocol. That would be difficult. He Fu Er thought but didn't show any of it. Thinking about whom to appoint to carry out the affair, he praised, "Wang Yi can take care of her, it's her good fortune. This one will get someone to do so." He Yuan sneered, "If she wasn't Empress Mimi, Ben Wang wouldn't have spent the thought." He Fu Er changed, "The fact that Chu Si Fei had a Jijie who is the Empress, it is her good fortune." "Alright," He Yuan gave a yawn, "according to you, then isn't it the Empress' misfortune to have a sister like her?" He Fu Er laughed dryly. He knew that Wang Yi was drunk and didn't dare to reply. "Leave." He Yuan once again gathered the beauty beside him into his arms. "Don't disturb Ben Wang." There were many women in Rui Wang Fu. It wasn't a major matter for a Ce Shi to die, but this Ce Shi was the Empress Mimi. So they had to find someone to report it into the palace. The news first passed to the Department of Household Affairs, then the department would report to the Empress. But, according to emotional reasoning, this matter should have been reported to the Empress directly. Yet, according to protocol, Chiyu Su was only a Ce Shi. Such an unlucky minor matter shouldn't ever have passed to the Empress. In the end, He Fu Er pondered for a long time before finding a circular way. Chu Qingju had been perplexed upon hearing that the junior supervisor of the Department of Household Affairs had asked for an audience. At the moment, she wasn't in charge of palace affairs, so why was the supervisor running to her? When she finished reading the announcement of death that the supervisor had presented, she felt conflicted inside. She held the letter, but didn't know what to say. In her impressions, Chu Su was a talented and beautiful woman. She could have married into a good family, but she had to run with her ambitions and picked a wrong path, ruining her life. If she hadn't become a concubine of Rui Wang Fu in the beginning, and instead married a son of a noble family, then she wouldn't have lost her life. Weakness could harm one's life, that was the original Chu Qingju. Greed could ruin a woman, that had been Chu Yusu. The former was pitiful, the latter was lamentable. Empress, the junior supervisor of the Department of Household Affairs, saw the Empress' expression wasn't well and his heart jumped. He didn't know what the Empress was thinking. You are excused. Chu Qingju put down the letter in her hand, waving her hand. Wang Yang, take some people with you to Rui Wang Fu, and burn some incense for Ben Gong to Chu Si Fei, and add some paper money and candles. It was lamentable as a concubine, but as a wife, how many women were happy? In this era of one wife and many concubines, women were fated to sacrifice themselves in history. Chapter 100 Empress, this is what the Emperor ordered Nubi to deliver to you. Chu Qingju looked at the objects the palace maids held and saw that it was clothing and shoes suited for a pregnant female. She smiled, commenting, it must have been difficult for Emperor to take all this trouble. Even though the palace maids on her side had already made many pieces for her, she would remember He Heng's goodwill. Mu Jin saw the palace maids out to the doorway of the hall. When she came back, she found that everything had already been sorted away. She assumed Chu Xiaojia's death a few days earlier had affected the mood of the Empress, and went forward to ask, Nyang Nyang, Nubi heard the Tai say that when the embryo is 3 or 4 months old, there would be movements. Have you felt anything? Really? Ben Gong had thought it was an upset stomach. Chu Qingju had been very interested in the fetus in her belly. She rubbed her chin, pondering, no wonder I kept feeling strange movements in my belly. If it was an ailment of the digestive system, Dean Du would have already found it. Mu Jin opened the windows in the room, looking at the appearance of the sky. Nubi sees that the weather is well, Nyang Nyang could take a walk. Lu Mama, who had been standing silently at one side, looked out the window and nodded. Mu Jin Gunyang is right. Right now, His Highness has been in Nyang Nyang's belly for more than 3 months. Appropriate walking would be beneficial for you and His Highness. Lu Mama had been He Heng's decreed pregnancy mama. She was extremely knowledgeable about pregnancy. For Chu Qingju, she was an encyclopedia of pregnancy. From movement to diet to thinking, she knew everything. Since Lu Mama says so, then let's walk. Chu Qingju touched her face, and took Jin Zhan's hand to stand up from the recliner. Mu Jin placed a fox skin cape to Chu Qingju before allowing Chu Qingju to walk outside. The weather at the beginning of winter wasn't very cold. Chu Qingju uneasily pulled at the cape on her body, taking in the sun that had no heat. Giving a yawn, she asked, heard yesterday that Emperor punished a palace maid, do you know what happened? Mu Jin and Jin Zhan exchanged a glance. In the end, it was Mu Jin who spoke. Nubi isn't very clear but only heard that the Emperor found that the attire of the maid broke protocol. It provoked the Emperor's temper and he flared out. They had been afraid that this matter would affect the mood of the Empress and hadn't told her. Even though they hadn't said anything to Nyang Nyang, how did Nyang Nyang know? Chu Qingju knew what they were thinking, lazily pointing out, Ben Gong is pregnant, many people in the Hogong are having thoughts. Now, even the palace maids have other ideas. Nyang Nyang, it doesn't matter what they think since Emperor isn't interested in them. What you should do now is rest and take care of the fetus. Why should you waste attention on these people? Mu Jin urged, furthermore, Nyang Nyang, you are Empress, can anyone overtake you? Naturally, I won't waste attention on these people. Chu Qingju curled her lips in a smile, looking at a corner in front of her, but there are those people who come to hinder Ben Gong's eyes. Mu Jin and Jin Zhan simultaneously followed Chu Qingju's gaze. Their faces both darkened. It was Han Liangdi and the Emperor standing together as they talked. Looking at the smile on Han Liangdi's face, it was as though she had found a treasure. Seeing the scene, the two looked worriedly at the Empress and found the smile on the corner of the Empress' mouth had grown wide. Her eyes, though, had grown cold. Mujin couldn't resist saying, "Nyang Nyang, maybe the Emperor just coincidentally encountered Han Liangdi." Chu Qingju snorted. There weren't that many coincidences in the world, and not that many emperors who would keep themselves pure for a woman. The previous dynasty had Yuming Emperor and he had been extolled for a few hundred years. It could be seen just how rare the love of an emperor was, one in a few hundred years. Han Liangdi hadn't thought she would coincidentally encounter the emperor in the imperial gardens. She looked bashfully at the upright figure of He Hing, asking in a soft voice, "Emperor, Chia has learned a new song a few days ago. Does Emperor want to listen?" Han Liangdi's voice is like a oriole in a valley. "Jin hasn't heard you sing for a time." He Hing saw a pavilion nearby and pointed at it. "How about you sing for Jin today?" Han Liangdi was so happy she almost couldn't disguise her expression. Following behind the emperor and watching as he sat, she said, "Chia will disgracefully present." Cutting by candlelight by the western window, the moonlight silver frost, asking when next month she would return, but saw that she was at another place. Ming He, standing by He Hing, listened and then sniffed his nose. The song seemed as though Han Liangdi was trying to invite favor from the emperor. She doesn't see the other's tears, and doesn't know of the other's hurt. When the song ended, Han Liangdi's eyes were slightly red as she pretended to be unaffected and bowed to He Hing. "Chia's voice isn't as good as it was once. Sorry to have disappointed the emperor." "Han Liangdi's songs are as pleasing to the ear as before, Shen." He Hing glanced outside the pavilion and his eyelids jumped. "Shen thinks that these matters of music, it's fine to play with occasionally, but shouldn't pay too much attention to these things. Right now, you are a 5th grade Liangdi. It isn't very dignified to practice singing all day. In the future, if you want Jen to listen to a song, you can let the Department of Music rehearse and then let Jen see." She hadn't thought she would hear such a thing. Han Liangdi instantly choked. Even the tears that had almost brimmed out were choked down. Emperor's words are too harsh. Chia feels that Han Liangdi's songs are very good, and the people of the music department cannot compare. Chu Qingju held Mu Jin's hand as she walked into the pavilion. After she walked in front of He Hing, she was going to bend in a greeting but was held up by He Hing. "If you like it, then let Han Liangdi go back and practice more. In the future, you and Jin can listen together." He Hing supported her to sit beside him, placing a stack of pastries in front of her. "Or you can let Han Liangdi sing now. Jin remembers that Han Liangdi had a Tan Lien Fu that she sang well." Chu Qingju smiled enchantingly, her eyes flickering before resting on Han Liangdi. After thinking for a short while, she shook her head, rejecting, "No, it's all right. It's just as Emperor has said, Han Liangdi might not have a high rank but she is one of the Fapine of the palace. To let her sing for Chia, it is too humiliating. You are the Empress who mothers the world. There's no humiliation in her singing for you." He Hing slightly raised his chin as he looked at Han Liangdi. "Han Liangdi, what do you say? To be able to sing for Emperor and Empress is Chia's good fortune." Han Qing he forced out a warm smile and bowed to Chu Qingju. "Please Nyang Nyang, allow Pinky to sing for you." She felt half of her heart was freezing and the other half was boiling. The turmoil was extremely painful, but she had to make herself a singer. Peach blossoms are bewitching, pear blossoms white, only the lotus blossom. Chu Qingju gave a yawn and lazily leaned on He Heng's shoulder, muttering, "Today's weather is so good, it makes people sleepy." He Heng knew that after a woman became pregnant, she was easily drowsy. He reached around her back to let her lean more comfortably. The other hand slowly held a teacup that he sipped from as he frequently lowered his head to look at Chu Qingju leaning on his shoulder. Han Qing he looked at the scene and for some reason, felt her throat hurt, as though singing one word was extremely difficult. By the end, even she didn't know how she sang. "Stop," He said in a small voice, "Empress is asleep, don't disturb her." He bent down to lift the person leaning on his shoulder. Then he took a deep breath, pretty heavy. His Empress looked beautiful and had a thin waist. Even 3 months pregnant, her belly wasn't visible. But when he lifted her, he found that she was much heavier than in the past. It did seem that what she ate every day was effective. Thinking that Chu Qingju's belly would get bigger in the next few months, he couldn't help but furrow his brow. By that time, he didn't know how much Chu Qingju would endure. Even sleep would be difficult then. "Emperor, why don't Nukai get someone to bring the sedan?" Seeing the situation, Ming-He came forward to ask. "No need," He firmly held Chu Qingju, "this place isn't far from Tianqi Palace." "Yes," Ming-He complied and dropped to follow behind with a bent body. He prepared for the possibility of the Emperor's hands faltering. He would use his body to cushion the Empress. From there to the rear hall of Tianqi Palace, it was a somewhat horrifying experience for him. Respectfully seeing off Emperor and Empress, Han Qing he watched as the Emperor carried the Empress down the stairs of the pavilion. When she couldn't see their figures anymore, she finally angrily threw the cups from the table. What did the Empress mean, that she, Han Qing he, was born to be a singer? They were all the Emperor's women, yet she had to sing for the other to hear. Juzi, the palace maid behind her, was frightened by her actions. Scanning the surroundings, she sighed when she saw no one was around, urging, "Don't be angry outside, be careful since the walls have ears." Right now, she's pregnant and can't serve the Emperor, but she's still holding on to the Emperor and not letting go. Even like this, many people are praising her for being virtuous. Pa. Han Qing he's anger couldn't be restrained. In the recent days as she bullied Feng Zi, she forgot her bounds and also forgot her identity. Shu Zi. The palace maid was so frightened her legs grew weak, kneeling in front of her. "Stop talking, that will get your head chopped off. Stand up, why do I only have people as stupid as you serving me?" Han Qing he breathed heavily. Seeing the person beside her pale in fright, she slowly calmed down. "Return." Such a good chance to get close to the Emperor had been ruined by Chu Qingju just like that. It was enough to make people hate. Chu Qingju had her eyes closed as she leaned into He Heng's embrace. Hearing his ever heavier breaths, she opened her eyes when they neared Tianqi Palace. She looked confusedly at the surroundings, before raising her head to look at He Heng. "Emperor? Awake?" He Heng stopped walking, lowering his head to look at the woman with a confused face in his arms. "You fell asleep. I'm taking you back to the palace." "I'm much heavier now. Set me down," Chu Qingju urged. "Emperor, how could you carry me this entire way?" "It's too tiring." "It's nothing," He Heng tightened his grasp. "Don't fuss, we're almost there. Zhen will carry you back." Chu Qingju buried her head in his chest, muttering, "So embarrassing." "I've seen you in more embarrassing situations," He Heng laughed out loud, "but it's true that you are much heavier now." Chu Qingju pinched at his waist, sniffing. "Well, whose fault is that?" My fault, my fault." He Heng continued to take large steps forward, not at all affected by Chu Qingju's pinch. "Heavier is good, I like you heavier." The crowd of people following behind silently pushed their heads lowered. They expressed that they hadn't heard anything. Of course, they also didn't see the fawning act of the Emperor as he tried to win favor with the Empress. Chapter 101 The Trust of the Emperor. Nyang. Fine sweat beaded Huang Yang's forehead as he looked in trepidation at the Empress who was partaking in her meal. He didn't even dare to breathe hard, as though any movement would enrage the Empress. "What is it?" Chu Qingju slowly ate a bowl of chicken porridge. Matched with the crisp pickled cabbage, it was flavorful. She saw Huang Yang refraining from speech in a panicked manner as she rinsed her mouth with the tea that Jin Zhan handed over and wiped her mouth with a handkerchief from Yin Lu. say it, what has made you so panicked? Huang Yang dropped to kneel at Chu Qingju's feet. Han Liangdi was found this morning in the lotus pond of the imperial garden, already swollen. Chu Qingju stilled. Han Qing, he died. How can you mention such a matter in front of Nyang Nyang? Mu Jin's brows furrowed. Now that Nyang Nyang was pregnant, this kind of matter would scare Nyang Nyang and the small highness in her belly. Shut your mouth. It's fine. Chu Qingju's left hand slowly caressed her slightly upraised belly. Your expression wouldn't be this terrible for this kind of minor matter. Is it related to the cause of Han Liangdi's death? Huang Yang saw Nyang Nyang's calm composure and could only say through gritted teeth, the people of the Department of Household Affairs found a white jade hairpin on Han Liangdi's body. Someone recognized that it was Nyang Nyang's. When Jin Zhan and Yuzhan heard the words, their faces paled in fright. The clothing and hair ornaments of Nyang Nyang were under their management. If Nyang Nyang's things were lost, the most suspicious people would be them. The two knelt down, faces terrible as they said, Nyang Nyang, Nubi wasn't able to look after the ornaments properly and begs for mercy. Chu Qingju laughed out loud, motioning for the two to stand up. Then she stood, uttering, such a cold and desolate month but such a good play. They could even find the white jade hairpin that Ben Gong had lost half a month ago. Since right now, it's the two Mohu who are in charge of the Hogong, let us go visit Fu Shou Palace. Ben Gong is very curious about this matter. Huang Yang looked in puzzlement at the Empress. Nyang Nyang didn't even seem to be the slightest bit angry. Mu Jin was perplexed and then recovered, that's so true. Huang Yang, go prepare the phoenix carriage. From last night, the snow had been coming down. Juzi is pregnant with His Highness. She can't endure the wind. Yes, Huang Yang cheerfully stood and turned to let the servants prepare the phoenix carriage. In Fu Shou Palace, the two Empress Dowagers, He Heng, Jin and Princess Royal, the three other Feipin and the main and assistant supervisor of the Department of Household Affairs were gathered for the matter of Han Liangdi's drowning. Empress Dowager Wei's expression finished listening to the report the palace maid kneeling had reported. With a grave face, she repeated, you mean to say that yesterday in the late evening, Han Liangdi went out of her residence alone. An hour later, you felt that it was strange, and started to search with the other servants and eventually found Han Liangdi's corpse. Yes, the one that answered was Han Liangdi personal maid. She looked frightfully at the room full of powerful people. Before Juzi left, she said, what did she say? Said that if the Empress could put importance on her, then in the future, she would receive the Emperor's favor. When the palace maid finished speaking, she pressed her forehead to the floor, so afraid she trembled all over. According to what this palace maid says, the one who invited Han Liangdi out was Empress, and then the Department of Household Affairs found the Empress hairpin on Han Liangdi's body. The corners of Empress Dowager Wei's lips drew back, her voice scornful as she concluded, meaning that the Empress murdered Han Liangdi? He Heng's brows furrowed as he asked, Muhu, Qingju is the Empress of a country. Why would she try to kill an unimportant minor Feipin? Last night, he had slept in the front hall of Tianqi Palace, and hadn't been together with Qingju, but he believed that Han Liangdi's death had nothing to do with Chu Qingju. Hearing her son unconsciously call out her Erxie's name in front of so many people, Empress Dowager Wei raised an eyebrow at him before responding, Aijia is very suspicious of the matter as well. Empress Dowager, Emperor, the palace maid's voice shook. It was because half a month ago, Juzi had sung for the Emperor in the gardens, and had been found out by the Empress. Not long after that, people started to shortchange Juzi's allowance. Juzi went out last night to see the Empress because there was no other way for her to survive. Please, Empress Dowager and Emperor, give Juzi justice. Yesterday in the evening, it started to snow. The Empress is already 3 months pregnant. She would go visit Han Liangdi in the snow and somehow managed to push Han Liangdi into the lotus pond. Jin and Princess snorted, after doing all that, she wouldn't have detected that she had lost something, just returning to rest in the rear hall of Tianqi Palace. She is too vigorous. Nubi didn't say that the Empress did it. The head of the palace maid shrunk back as she stuttered, and Nubi thinks that it could have been a servant. Outrageous. How can Jin not be clear about when someone enters or leaves Jin's residence? He slammed the table. Tianqi Palace has guards and secret bodyguards at all times. Not just the Empress, even the normal palace maids and Taijian's entry and exit would be recorded. You couldn't slander the Empress, so you turned to slander Empress people. What is your purpose? The palace maid clearly hadn't thought of that flaw. She had been taken into the palace by Han Qinghe from the Wangfu and didn't know that the security of Tianqi Palace was that stringent. A beat later, she started to bang her head continuously. Nubi doesn't mean anything, and asks for Empress Dowager and Emperor to investigate thoroughly. Empress Dowager Wei raised a teacup as she looked icily at the kowtowing palace maid. She didn't care that the maid's forehead was bleeding and turned to say to Muhu, Empress Dowager, not even these people, even us sisters had entered the palace for a few years before knowing of the matter. The daring villain, who has plotted to harm the palace fae and slander the Empress, is truly evil. That's so true. Aijia had been Empress for more than a year after entering the palace before finding out that there are hidden guards in Tianqi Palace to protect the Emperor. Muhu Empress Dowager smiled mockingly as she raised her head, her gaze sweeping over the three of Jiang, Feng, and Luo. But in the past, no one dared to frame Aijia. The younger generation is much more courageous. Jiang, Feng and Luo couldn't sit and walk together to kneel at the center of the hall. Until the matter had been solved, all three of them were suspects. But the consequences of the enormous crime of plotting to harm the Empress and the palace fae would reach even their families. Could they bear to suffer the outcome? All right, you three don't have to kneel. Empress Dowager Wei set down the teacup. Regarding Aijia Xerxes, Aijia is very clear. She isn't a person who would do such a thing. Even if she did, she wouldn't act so stupidly. Aijia doesn't care why the person is so reckless, but if they could admit it themselves, Aijia won't act against her family. But when Aijia finds out personally, don't blame Aijia for being ruthless. The main and vice supervisors of the Department of Household Affairs, by this time, had realized that the two Empress Dowagers and the Emperor were protecting the Empress. The three had worked together for many years and didn't need to exchange a look to know what the others were thinking. The main supervisor of the department stepped forward. Emperor, Empress Dowagers, Nukai has just found that Han Liangdi showed traces on the back of the head from being hit with something heavy. From the impact and the location, the criminal must be shorter than Han Liangdi, and is a female. The Empress is slightly taller than Han Liangdi, and pregnant women cannot lift heavy objects, so the criminal cannot be the Empress. Nukai has also looked at the record from yesterday to today of the entrance and exit records of Tianqi Palace. There are no suspects among the palace maids and Taijian that attend the Empress. From this, it can be concluded that the Empress is certainly unconnected to the matter of Han Liangdi. He nodded, his face softening. It seems someone wants to hit two birds with one stone. His gaze swept across the three Feipin, his gaze landing on Luo Yinxiu and Feng Zijin, who were shorter than Han Qinghe, his face darkening again. Catch all of the palace maids and Taijian that serve Luo Guipin and Ping Kairen, and interrogate each one. Emperor. Feng Zijin crawled forward. Chia is innocent, Emperor. Luo Yinxiu looked at the overly excited Feng Zijin and continued to keep her head down. Emperor, the Empress asks to see you. Ming He came in to report. Allow. He Heng's fierce expression instantly became gentle. When Chu Qingju entered, he couldn't resist standing and supporting the person to sit beside him. It's snowing outside, why did you come? Just heard that Han Liangdi passed away, and Chia's hairpin was coincidentally on her body. Chia couldn't stay away. Chu Qingju frowned slightly. Chia's hairpin was lost half a month ago. It was that time when Chia fell asleep in the imperial gardens. The location was unknown. Emperor had then specially bestowed Chia a set of cat's eye hairpins as a replacement. Who knew that it would be found at Han Liangdi's body? He Hing remembered. Half a month ago, he and Chu Qingju heard Han Liangdi sing and then Chu Qingju fell asleep. Afterwards, he had carried her back to Tianqi Palace before they had discovered that 2 hairpins had fallen off. On the second day, he had gotten Ming He to deliver a box of hair ornaments decorated with cat's eye stones to the rear hall of Tianqi Palace. It seemed that the white jade hairpin was one of the 2 that had fallen off before. Don't be angry, Jin knows you aren't connected with the matter. He Hing patted the back of the hand. Jin will definitely send someone to investigate and clear your innocence. Chu Qingju sighed and nodded her head slowly. She looked in apology at the 2 Empress Dowagers. Urxi is extremely unfilial to have made both Muhu worried. This matter has nothing to do with you, Muhu Empress Dowager said. Empress, you are just too naive. This Hogong always have those of malicious and daring thoughts. Aijia and your Muhu have been in the Hogong for so many years, but really haven't seen tactics as stupid as this one. To keep such a person in the Hogong, Aijia wouldn't feel safe. That's so true. You are pregnant, don't waste attention on such matters. Aijia is here for anything and won't let them slight you. When Empress Dowager Wei finished talking, she said to He Hing, take the Empress away quickly. Such unlucky matters shouldn't dirty one's ears. You too, don't worry, Aijia and Jijia will certainly uncover the truth. You should leave here now. He Hing stood and bowed to the 2. This son has no attention to spare for the matters of the Hogong and has to trouble the 2 Muhu. Leave, Empress Dowager Wei waved her hand, shooing them off like she was hurrying away ducks. After the Emperor and Empress left, she gave a cold smile, calmly ordering, for anyone suspicious, use heavy torture. Aijia doesn't believe that it can't be found out. She swept a cold gaze at He Heng's 3 Feipin. This Hogong will not tolerate women who think themselves clever. The 3 of Jiang, Feng and Luo couldn't help but shudder. Jiang Yongyu's face was solemn as she bowed respectfully. Thanks Empress Dowager for instructing. Empress Dowager Wei slightly nodded her head at her, and then said to Feng and Luo who were still kneeling, before the matter is solved, you 2 will stay in the Xingshan behind Fu Shou Palace to reflect, and will save Aijia from having to put people to watch you. Yes. Luo Yinxiu respectfully gave a kowtow. She was clear that the Empress Dowager was cutting off their escape route. But since she didn't do it, what did she have to be afraid of? Chapter 102 East and West. In the place that was the Hogong, there were many secrets. It was possible that there wouldn't be a trace of what you had done. The crucial aspect was how high you climbed and how steady you stood. The 2 Empress Dowagers ordered the Department of Household Affairs to use torture. The people who served Luo Yinxiu and Feng Zijin all went through the process. It didn't take their lives, but it made people unable to even plead for death. Unable to endure the last cycle of torture, a palace maid called Zhu Yu spilled it all, even revealing what her Zhuzi had done in the Wangfu. Aijia did wonder how a Feipin, who didn't even have a secure position, could kill someone and remain undetected. So there was someone who helped. Muhu Empress Dowager read through the confession and handed it to Empress Dowager Wei sitting beside her. She sighed, exclaiming, "This Feng Shi is too bold." Empress Dowager Wei scanned the confessions, so angry that her face became red. She wasn't one who showed what she felt, but what the confessions revealed was shocking and infuriating. Especially when the criminal was someone she had personally picked for her son out of the female candidates. "Come, lead Luo Guipin and Ping Kairan here," she suppressed her anger and sighed at Muhu Empress Dowager. "We should have known earlier. Aijia shouldn't have arranged for such a cruel woman to serve at the emperor's side." No wonder Hanger and Erxie had been residing every day but still didn't have any children in the past. It must have been the poison which harmed the body, and it took about half a year to recover from. Mimi, you should not blame yourself. You can only see a person's appearance but not their hearts, Muhu Empress Dowager comforted. It was lucky that it wasn't more serious. It was the heavens that protected them. But since this matter has been solved, should we tell Emperor and Empress? Such a major matter, the Empress poisoned when she had been in the Wang Fu, it wasn't right not to inform them. This kind of major incident, we can't conceal it from the Emperor and Empress. Empress Dowager Wei had recovered her composure. Also, send someone to lead Shu Gui Taifei and Rui Wang over. It should be like this, Muhu Empress Dowager nodded. This matter was related to Shu Gui Taifei. As they talked, Feng and Luo came in. Just 2 days in Xingxinzhai, but both of them looked much more fragile. Luo Guipin still managed to keep her posture, but Ping Kairen was a sorry figure. Both eyes were dry and unfocused as though she hadn't slept for 2 whole days. Come, give Luo Guipin a seat. Muhu Empress Dowager's lips curled. Even though she was smiling, others could still feel her imposing dignity. Thanks, Empress Dowager of both palaces, Luo Yinxiu released a breath inside. To let her sit now, it meant that the matter had been investigated. She was clear that she had nothing to the matter but was afraid that others would wrongly accuse her. After seeing the present situation, she had nothing to worry about. Chu Qingju heard that the 2 Empress Dowagers had called for her and He Hing to Fu Shou Palace, and looked in shock at He Hing, who had been playing a match of Weiqi with her. Muhu has investigated the matter this quickly. He Hing naturally wouldn't inform her of the various strategies the Department of Household Affairs had, and only set down the stone in his hand. He smiled, answering, "In this world, when something is done, then a trace will be found. You have to know that in this world, there isn't a case that cannot be solved. It's only whether someone will seriously investigate it." Chu Qingju agreed with He Heng's words. People always talked, the best way for others not to find out was to not do it, so it was better to not commit malicious acts. Seeing her face full of approval, He Heng stood, adding, "Since Muhu wants to see us, let's go take a look at Fu Shou Palace." He ordered for a servant to bring a fox skin cape and then made Chu Qingju put on a thick rabbit skin hand muff before leading her out of Tianqi Palace. Coming out of Tianqi Palace, Chu Qingju felt the harsh winter wind blow into her face. The snow on the road had been swept away by the Taijian, but the roofs and the trees were full of snow. She took in a breath, such heavy snow. Reaching to pull the collar of her cape higher to cover her face, He Hing helped her onto his own carriage. Once the 2 of them settled, he replied, "Now, it's the 12th month. It's normal to have this much snow." Even though she had seen the heavy snow of Jing City last year, Chu Qingju had a special feeling for snow. It was most likely due to the fact that she lived in the south and always read of the people making snowmen in the language books and had been disappointed that she couldn't make one herself. Not being able to obtain something that other people told them about from when they were little, most people would be stubborn in their attachment. Chu Qingju occasionally lifted the curtain as the imperial carriage traveled and saw the palace maids and Taijian kneeling on both sides of the road. Snow was still falling, the ground was cold, but those people knelt with their backs straight, not a hint of slacking. As they entered Fu Shou Palace, He Hing saw Feng Shi kneeling in the center of the hall. Kneeling behind her was a few pale-faced palace maids and Taijian. His expression darkened and held hands with Chu Qingju to bow to the 2 Empress Dowagers before sitting to the side. The ground and walls of Fu Shou Palace were heated. Chu Qingju had taken off the fox skin cape but still felt hot. Using her hand to slightly pull at her clothing, she looked at Feng Zijin kneeling on the ground, asking, "Muhu, what is going on?" These years, this Feng Shi has been very brave. "Emperor, Empress, take a look," Empress Dowager Wei handed Chen Yu's confession to He Hing. Seeing her son's face become colder, she knew he was angry, and sighed, "It's Mohu who has to apologize for arranging such a villain beside you. Mohu cannot say that. Feng Shi is malicious and adept at disguising herself. Is that Mohu's fault?" He Hing furiously slammed the confession onto the table beside him. It was Shen who was blind to have kept such a woman like this for so many years. Emperor. Feng Zijin knew that the matter had been exposed and looked discontentedly at the furious emperor. If it wasn't that emperor had to marry her, and favor her, why else would Chia have to do such things? Seeing the hand that Feng Zijin pointed at her, Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. The marriage had been decreed by Qing the emperor and He Heng who decided to marry the bride, so why did it become all her fault in the end? If she had the ability, she should be trying to kill Qing the emperor and He Heng. What was the point of poisoning the original Chu Qingju? Empress was the Wang Fei who Xiandi decreed. Emperor and her are in deep love, it's the natural order of the world. You are just a small Qisher who, in jealousy, decided to plot against the emperor. You poisoned Wang Fei and the Wang Fu, murdered Han Liangdi after entering the palace and framed the empress. Such a frightening person, and shameless to be angry at the emperor for marrying. It is very funny, Empress Dowager Wei smiled icily, so many Shirtia in this world. If they were all like you, wouldn't the world end? Xingmu Empress Dowager, you were only a Feipin too. Didn't you have times when you had been discontent, but you still became the high-up Xingmu Empress Dowager? Feng Zijin raised her head to stare directly at Empress Dowager Wei, scornfully asking, "What's wrong with Jie? We're all women, how is Chu Qingju nobler than me? A villain like you cannot compare to Xingmu Empress Dowager." Muhu Empress Dowager looked coldly at Feng Shi babbling nonsense, both in appearance and morals, you cannot compete against Xingmu Empress Dowager. In the past when Aijia was still Empress, Xingmu Empress Dowager respected Aijia at every turn, and didn't slight Aijia who did not receiving any imperial favor. The emperor she raised is intelligent and thinks of the people. Becoming Xingmu Empress Dowager, it is the will of the heavens. A woman such as you who dares to poison the wife, how can you compare? You are full of nonsense. Muhu Empress Dowager's words defended Xingmu Empress Dowager from all angles and told other people that she was approving and in great favor for Xingmu Empress Dowager to sit and rise at the same height as her. She even pushed the matter onto the fate of the heavens, flattering both Empress Dowager Wei and the emperor and explicitly expressed her position. When she heard the speech, Chu Qingju finally understood how Muhu Empress Dowager, in all these years without the favor of the emperor and with no son of her own, managed to keep her seat and why Qing the emperor hadn't ever thought to dispose of her. Her attitude and tactics, such an understanding woman. But just like Empress Dowager Wei, she hadn't met a reliable man, it was so regretful. She turned her head to look at He Heng. As expected, his expression had relaxed, clearly very satisfied and grateful for Muhu Empress Dowager's words. Emperor, Shu Gui Taifei and Rui Wang have arrived. Summon. Air Chen greets both Muhu, greets Huang Xiong, Huang Sao. When He Yuan entered the hall, he calmly bowed to the four people as though he didn't see the people kneeling. This was the first time Chu Qingju saw He Yuan after He Heng had ascended the throne. Due to the fact that she didn't like He Yuan in the first place, she hadn't looked at him when he entered. But once the other spoke, she felt that He Yuan felt wrong, as though he went from a delusional youth to a steady yet silent uncle. The change was so drastic that she felt suspicious that the person in front of her and the He Yuan of the past were two different people. When Shu Gui Taifei saw Feng Zijin kneeling on the ground, her expression became slightly ugly. Before she could speak, Muhu Empress Dowager threw the confession in front of her. Shu Gui Taifei, look at that. If Empress Dowager Wei had done that, others might have said that she was arrogant. But if Muhu Empress Dowager did it, then it was right. He Yuan looked at the confession that landed on the ground, and then at his Mufei, whose expression had changed. He then knew that Mu Fei had done something in the Hogong that the Empress Dowager had found out. When he bent down to pick up the paper, and saw that Ping Kairen and Mu Fei had cooperated to kill Han Liangdi to frame the Empress, his calm face became white. He turned to look at Shu Gui Taifei, Mu Fei. Shu Gui Taifei didn't dare to look at her son. She apprehensively declared to the two Empress Dowagers, "This throne should belong to my son. Why is it that you can live here? Stop her mouth." Muhu Empress Dowager commanded darkly, "Shu Gui Taifei, Aijia thinks that you should be more careful." The emperor ascended the throne properly and rightly. When Xiandi made his will, all the advisors had been present. Your misrepresentation of the facts won't be tolerated. Mu Fei is ignorant, Urchin begs both Empress Dowagers to spare her life. He Yuan watched as his Mu Fei was held down by two mamas, a handkerchief stuffed into her mouth. He gritted his teeth and knelt in front of He Hing, "Please, Emperor, punish lightly." Chu Qingju had been sitting by He Hing's side. Looking at a once willful and brazen person kneeling in front of her, she felt a strange sense of pity. When Shu Gui Taifei saw it, she couldn't stop shaking her head. Tears of panic fell down as she couldn't speak. No one would recognize that just a year ago, she had been the Shu Gui Fei, the most favored of the Hogong. 10 years west, 10 years east. But Shu Gui Taifei and He Yuan hadn't thought that this day would happen. Chu Qingju couldn't help but look at the two Empress Dowagers and found that their expressions were frightfully calm, as though Shu Gui Taifei and He Yuan were putting on an unfunny play in front of them and they were criticizing from high up. She couldn't help but touch her belly. If she was Shu Gui Taifei, she wouldn't want to see this either. Chapter 103 Who Misunderstood Whom. The crimes that Shu Gui Taifei have committed cannot be forgiven. Rui Wang, you are asking for mercy for Shu Gui Taifei, but have you thought of the innocent Han Liangdi and the framed empress? Muhu Empress Dowager saw that He Yuan's forehead was bleeding from kowtowing before demanding coldly, should we not punish her because she is Gui Taifei? He Yuan stopped kowtowing. He turned to look at the Mu Fei that was being held by the mamas and with a humble attitude, declared, Mu Fei is Chen's elder. If she has committed a crime, it should be assumed by a Ken. Injustice has a beginning, a debt has an owner. If the offenses of the elders are assumed by the younger generation, are there still any laws? He Hing put down the teacup, frowning, if all the people in the Long dynasty are like you, how can Jin rule the world? Feng Shi plotted to kill Fei and framed the empress. She has malicious conduct and is bestowed 5 feet of white silk, He Hing indifferently declared, the Feng clan, due to not properly teaching their daughters, are removed of their title and for 3 generations, cannot enter the court as an official. Emperor, please give a favor, Emperor. Feng Zijin didn't think that the emperor wouldn't care about past feelings, and even her paternal family would be affected. She wanted to kneel in front of He Hing but was dragged back by 2 palace maids who pressed her into the ground. Emperor. Feng Zijin was so panicked she started to sob. She wanted to beg for mercy but her mouth was stuffed so she couldn't talk. He Hing looked coldly at her, no emotion in his eyes as though she was just a stranger. Drag her down, don't leave her here to disturb others. Qian Chong Xian saw the emperor's expression and motioned to the person beside him. Very quickly, others dragged Feng Zijin away. Sitting at the side, Luo Yinxiu watched Feng Zijin dragged down like an animal and couldn't help but shudder. Her eyes when they looked at Chu Qingju became even more worshipping. Chu Qingju pinched a piece of pastry in her hands. Even in this noisy situation, she still had the interest to eat pastries. Detecting that Luo Yinxiu was looking at her, she smiled at the other. Seeing the other lower her head in awe, she smiled carelessly and watched the farce in front of her with indifference. He Yuan raised his head to look at the 3 people that controlled his Mu Fei's life. He felt powerless. There hadn't been another time when he had felt this hopeless. Kneeling helplessly on the ground, he dazedly stared at the clean floor. Emperor, Shu Gue Taifei might have been accomplices with the criminal Feng Shi, but it really wasn't her that sent someone to kill Han Liangdi. Chia thinks that even though Shu Gue Taifei's crimes cannot be forgiven, they aren't worthy of death. Chu Qingju wiped her mouth, her gaze sweeping across Shu Gue Taifei. Why don't Mohu and Emperor spare Shu Gue Taifei's life? Oh. What is Empress thinking? He heard Chu Qingju speak and turned to look warmly at her. Chia heard in the time of Xiandi, Shu Gue Taifei frequently served by his side. If that's the case, why not let Shu Gue Taifei go guard the imperial tomb, to pray for Xiandi every day and reflect? Chu Qingju smiled as she looked at the two empress dowagers. How about that? A woman as used to luxury as Shu Gue Taifei going to the imperial tomb, wasn't that even more uncomfortable than death? Empress Dowager Wei looked at her Erxi. Seeing her sincere attitude, it didn't seem that she was purposefully making it difficult for Shu Gue Taifei. Empress Dowager Wei thought she was thinking too much. She turned to inquire of Mohu Empress Dowager, what does Jijia think? It hadn't been a year since Xiandi had passed. If they took care of Shu Gue Taifei now, some people might gossip. Sparing Shu Gue Taifei's life but sending her to stay at the harsh imperial tomb, it was the best choice. Mohu Empress Dowager looked in approval at Chu Qingju. It was perfectly normal that the emperor was able to fall in love with her. Aijia feels that it is very good. When Xiandi had been alive, he had been very much in love with Shu Gue Taifei. We have all served Xiandi, and Aijia doesn't bear to take your life. It's good for you to go serve Xiandi. At the very least, if Xiandi knew in the underworld, he certainly would be comforted. He Yuan hadn't, though the person that managed to keep his Mufei's life in the end was Chu Qingju. He looked towards Chu Qingju, making a full formal bow. Thanks Emperor, thanks Mohu, thanks. Huang saw. Hearing the obvious pause in He Yuan's words, Chu Qingju knew the other wasn't willing to bow to her. But she didn't care. Smiling slightly as she waved her hand, Sanshu doesn't have to be so courteous. However, He Hing looked at He Yuan with a complicated expression before standing and declaring, since the case has been solved, Shen will take Empress back to the palace. It's been cold recently, both Mohu should take care. Empress Dowager Wei and Mohu Empress Dowager both smiled and nodded. Empress Dowager Wei replied, Aijia knows, you two should also be more careful. Chu Qingju and He Hing walked out of Fu Shou Palace. Seeing a yellow plum tree bloom beside the road, she took a breath, the cold wind and fragrance entering her nose. This scent is so nice. If you like it, then get someone to go to the plum gardens every day to pick fresh ones to put in the room. He Hing held her warm hand. I don't dare to move this one. Who said I wanted to pick the flowers here? Chu Qingju peeked at him from the corner of her eyes. I'm not emperor. I'm not interested in any flowers. Why do I find the word strange? He Hing laughed lowly, disregarding Qian Chang Xan and Mu Jin holding the umbrellas for them from behind. Looking forward, he abruptly declared, my Hogong really is just only you, do you still not know? Just like Yu Ming emperor of the previous dynasty. Chu Qingju asked him with a smile. Qingju, I will never become Yu Ming emperor, and you won't become Zhao He empress. He Hing looked with a solemn expression at Chu Qingju. Before she could react, he twisted his head, I'm going back to the front hall. Finishing, he quickly rushed off, even leaving the imperial carriage to Chu Qingju. Watching as He Hing rushed off, Chu Qingju's lips curled but there was no mirth in her eyes. Behind her, Mu Jin detected that her mood wasn't right and handed the umbrella to Jin Zhan, carefully supporting her. Zhuzi, let's go back to the palace. Chu Qingju saw Mu Jin's caution and laughed silently. It's fine. The imperial carriage of the emperor isn't here, I can't ride it. You all can accompany me on the walk back. Mu Jin looked at the clean-swept road ahead and looked at the shoes on the Empress' feet. She hesitated before motioning for Yuzan to come forward, the two of them right and left, protecting the Empress in the middle. Huangsao, please wait. Chu Qingju returned her head and saw He Yuan walked in front of her, bowing deeply, professing, "Thanks, Huangsao, for just now asking for mercy for Qindi's Mu Fei. San Shu doesn't have to be this polite." Ben Gong didn't ask for leniency, but spoke the truth. Chu Qingju slowly walked forward. Seeing He Yuan maintain a distance 3 strides away from her on the right behind her, she didn't know what the other was doing. But she didn't speak. No matter what, today's favor, Qindi will remember. He Yuan placed his hands behind his back, his pale face turning ruddy from the cold wind. He looked at the side profile of Chu Qingju. The fact that Mu Fei is alive is due to the emperor's generosity. Chu Qingju stopped walking, turning her head to look at He Yuan's expression. She found the other was sincere and hesitated before asking. Ben Gong doesn't understand why Shu Gue Taifei would spend the effort to deal with Ben Gong. Is it of benefit to her? She was proud for a lifetime, and couldn't tolerate failure. He Yuan laughed at himself. Mu Fei and I dreamed for so many years. Waking up, not everyone can bear it. Mother and son were pretty brazen and proud in their dreams. Chu Qingju continued to walk. Occasionally, palace maids and Taijian would be encountered and they would all move aside and kneel. If a person doesn't dream, then they wouldn't have done anything. San Shu, have you regretted what you once did? He Yuan looked deeply at her, maybe regretted once, but now, everything is settled and it isn't important. The delusional person finally healed. Chu Qingju felt that he had jumped from his delusional stage of life into the elderly stage. His mentality had changed very rapidly. She remembered the last time she was near He Yuan. That was on Rui Wangfu. At that time, his delusional state had been very serious. History is the best teacher, Chu Qingju smiled. It's good that San Shu can think clearly now. Drinking, listening to songs, and being idle all day is good. He Yuan thought about the days he lived now. He didn't have to go to court, didn't have to manage any other matters, didn't have to pay attention to the cards others sent. Closing the doors of the Wangfu, he could amuse himself in any way, carefree like an immortal. Chu Qingju didn't know why He Yuan was saying such things to her, but he didn't seem to be implying anything. She could only reply, "Those days are very admirable." Huangsao must also like leisurely days. He Yuan smiled, allowing the snow to fall on his head and shoulders. Chu Qingju turned to see his state. She still remembered the first time she went to Rui Wangfu. She had been in the sedan. He Yuan had been standing like this, black hair, fox skin cap, youthful. When they neared Tianqi Palace, He Yuan stopped. He bowed again to Chu Qingju. Does Empress know the ending of Yuming Emperor and Zhao He Empress? Chu Qingju's eyebrow raised slightly. The historians of the previous dynasty recorded that the feelings between Yuming Emperor and Zhao He Empress was stronger than gold. After Zhao He Empress died due to illness, Yuming Emperor died not long after due to heartbreak. In the end, they were entombed in the same coffin. Not born at the same time but to die in the same coffin, isn't that the final ending? Huangsao might not know that Yuming Emperor in his later life had relations with a palace maid. When it was discovered by Zhao He Empress had a heart attack and died. Yuming Emperor regretted it greatly, but the deceased cannot be revived and it was too late to repent. Even though the two were buried together after Yuming Emperor's death, where was the meaning? In the end, the two didn't leave behind an heir and the successor was Yuming Emperor's deity son. What kind of fulfillment is that? He Yuan raised his hand, concluding, the reality of a story is often harsher than the books. So Yuming Emperor and Zhao He Empress weren't perfect. Qindi asks to be excused. Chu Qingju looked at his back. She suddenly smiled a beat later. It seemed that He Yuan had heard what she and He Hing had talked about. But was he explaining on He Heng's behalf or reminding her to not believe the Emperor's monogamy? Or maybe both. He might not be willing for her to be hurt over what He Hing had just said and didn't want her to believe in the Emperor's monogamy, which would cause her hurt in the future. But why was He Yuan so good-hearted to remind her? Was it to repay her for saving Shu Gui Taifei's life? Emperor Qian Chang Axian didn't understand why the Emperor had rushed back to the front hall. He carefully brushed off the snowflakes on He Heng's shoulders, tentatively asking, before going to Fu Shou Palace, "You said you want to have a meal with the Empress. So should the servants prepare now?" He Heng nodded unnaturally. He rubbed his slightly reddened ears, saying, "Right, go see if the Empress has returned. If she has, come back and tell Zhen. Zhen hasn't finished the Weiqi match with her." Yes, Qian Chang Axian left in helplessness. Since he was thinking of the Empress, then why did he just leave? Was he teasing the Empress? The thoughts of the Emperor, it was hard to guess. In the room, He Hing played with the pouch at his waist. The embroidery wasn't as good as the handiwork of the embroidery women, but it was his most favored possession. Thinking about Chu Qingju, he couldn't resist touching his still blushing ears. A man saying words of love seriously, it was slightly embarrassing. Chapter 104. This was good. The temperature of winter mornings were especially cold. The imperial guards guarding the palace doors drew in a cold breath but didn't dare stomp their feet to warm themselves. Watching the officials who usually preferred to ride a horse, sit on the sedan, the guards whose faces were paralyzed from the cold felt envious. "Hey brother, did you hear that Ning Wang is coming back to court?" The two imperial guardsmen that were changing shifts walked out of the palace gates. One of the brawny men said in a low voice as he looked at the surroundings, "I heard yesterday many people had sent up a memorandum to the Emperor about such a matter." The slightly thinner and taller one gave a superior expression. "It is certain that Ning Wang would return to court." Xiandi was partial to Rui Wang, so he locked Ning Wang on the outside. Now that it's cold, the Emperor is kind and honest, it's natural that he would summon Ning Wang back. Just watch, in 3 days, Ning Wang will be summoned back to court by the Emperor. The brawnier one rubbed his head, laughing honestly, "You're right. Rui Wang did such large mistakes, but the Emperor didn't take his life due to fraternal love. So it should be the same for His Highness Ning Wang." If he had a say, Ning Wang was really mistakenly accused and locked up. Maybe the assassination had been done by Rui Wang. It was just that Xiandi was partial and used Ning Wang as a shield. The thinner and taller one saw his mentality and didn't speak further, sighing inside. The twists and turns of the thoughts of those in the imperial family, whether it was fraternal friendship or anything else, it had nothing to do with them guards. Now that Ning Wang was returning to court, Rui Wang had become a powerless Jun Wang. These two had been at odds from the beginning. Rui Wang had been arrogant and offended countless people. One of those victims had been Ning Wang. There would be a reckoning for Rui Wang now. On the court, all the officials were discussing the matter of Ning Wang's return to the court. Some said since that Ning Wang had been locked under Xiandi's orders, the Emperor shouldn't change it. Some said that Ning Wang now knew his mistake and was brothers with the Emperor. It was right for him to return to court to help shoulder the burden for the Emperor, and that was all the reason to summon him to court. In reality, everyone knew that it was suspicious that Ning Wang had been locked up by Xiandi. Some suspected that Ning Wang had been a scapegoat pushed out by Xiandi for Rui Wang. But now, no one dared to mention that thought, and only fought over whether Ning Wang should return to court or not. Those that were at odds with Ning Wang naturally didn't want Ning Wang to return, but there were people who supported Ning Wang's return. Those of keen eyes found that among those that supported Ning Wang's return were many of the conservative faction. So these people started to think about the emperor's intentions. By now, Ning Wang's power base had been swept clean. Those officials that had been close to Ning Wang were suppressed completely by the officials that the emperor favored, and some became part of the conservative faction. Was the emperor trying to show the world he had fraternal love? The Duke of Zhongyi, who had once proved Ning Wang's guilt in front of Xiandi, suddenly changed his stance. The main idea was that Ning Wang had repented and changed for the better. He could make up for his offenses by returning to the court and working for the emperor, etc., etc. The Duke of Zhongyi and Luo Chongqing, a pair of sly father and son-in-law, always followed the emperor. Now that the two of them expressed their outlook, everyone understood the emperor's position. As morning court progressed, no one dared to oppose this matter. Since all the Darren have asked for Zhen's Deji to return to court, Zhen is very comforted. In the past, Deji as the eldest had been very attentive to Zhen and siblings. Now that Zhen is emperor, thinking of Deji living in the bitter cold mountain cold, it is difficult to sleep. For Deji to return to court to help lessen the burden for Zhen, it is a good thing. He Hing exclaimed, Duke of Zhongyi, why don't you personally go and bring Ning Wang back to Jing? The emperor saying that Ning Wang was attentive of his brothers, wasn't that telling everyone he didn't believe Ning Wang ordered the assassinations? Chen will obey. Tian Jin-ku knew that the emperor wanted Ning Wang to owe him a favor. He was very grateful inside for the goodwill that the emperor held towards the Tian family. After he made a deep bow to the emperor on the dragon chair, he retreated to one side. At this time, many people's hearts were sour. Thinking about the 4 months pregnant empress in the palace, they admired the other's good life. Deep in the palace, Chu Qingju was reading through a pile of cards. Seeing that it was close to the new year, even though they couldn't celebrate extravagantly because of the passing of Xiandi, they still had to hold celebrations. Those who sent in messages were noblewomen of significant status, such as Qing Wang Fei, Rui Wang Fei, and the duchesses and marquises. She randomly flipped open one. The beginning was wishing good fortune for Emperor and Empress, and a gift list was inserted behind. As to what was to be bestowed down to them, naturally there were people serving Chu Qingju who would spend the time to organize it. All Chu Qingju needed to do was listen to them recite the list. Nyang Nyang, how about resting a while? Mu Jin saw the Empress give a yawn and suggested, Nubi will sort the list before reciting it to you later. There's no need, Chu Qingju waved her hand. Looking at the sky outside, it's almost noon, the emperor is coming to eat later. Get the kitchen to prepare. Yes, Mu Jin indicated for Yin Lu to order the kitchen and gathered the cards that Chu Qingju read to one side. I heard that Rui Wang and Rui Wang Fei's relationship is extremely terrible and has made an uproar in Jing. Chu Qingju held the card from Rui Wang Fu. Rui Wang Fei is still an imperial wife. How could she fuss like that? Empress, even you heard. Jin Zhan sighed. Even before the emperor ascended, there was already news that the two were frequently fighting. It's gotten worse. Nubi has even heard that Rui Wang has said he was going to divorce Rui Wang Fu, which made the Qin family very angry. The Qin family wasn't a good phrase to Chu Qingju. She suddenly thought of Wei Qinshi, inquiring, I remember that Wei Ran Shuang's mother is one of the Qin family. How is Wei Ran Shuang right now? Jin Zhan revealed a devious smile. She doesn't count as one of the Qin family, just a distant cadet branch of the Qin family. After Xingmu Empress Dowager sent someone to reproach Wei Qinshi, Qin Darren made a match for Qin Gunyang on his own, but because of Xiandi's passing, the marriage has been delayed. At the very least, she's the emperor's cousin. If she married, her husband's family wouldn't dare to treat her unwell. Thinking about Wei Ran Shuang's fragile act, Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. Hopefully, after Wei Ran Shuang married, she wouldn't keep acting so pettily. Who knows what her family is thinking, she's not a good person anyway. Jin Zhan scornfully twisted her mouth. She still remembered that Wei Ran Shuang had wanted to be the emperor's chisher. That was said well. He Hing had a smile on his face as he strode in. He glanced at Jean Jean before proclaiming, "A woman like that, she really isn't a good person." Emperor. Jean Jean and the others were so frightened their faces were pale, legs soft as they knelt down. She hadn't thought that the emperor would hear her words. What would happen if the emperor thought the empress was jealous? Why did she act like Yin Lu and couldn't control her mouth now? Stand up, Zhen knows you all protect empress. He Hing waved his hand, evidently not caring what Jean Jean said. He walked in front of Chu Qingju and bent down. Seeing a cup of red date tea in front of her, he said, "I read some medicine books a few days ago. They said that a pregnant woman who drinks too much red date tea would increase blood circulation and it isn't good for the body." Finishing, he pushed the red date tea to one side. When did he start studying that area? Chu Qingju looked at him, smiled and asked, "Then what should I drink?" "Drink a small amount of Long Jing and Bai Luo Chun every day. Slightly seeped is good for the heart. I have flipped through many books, they all say the same." Finishing, he made Qian Chang Xian go find the imperial tribute tea from his stores. Chu Qingju didn't have much interest towards tea, but since the other put so much effort in, she wouldn't waste the other's goodwill. Complying with He Hing, she didn't touch the cup of red date tea. Emperor is so busy lately, how was there time to look at all this? I don't feel secure in putting you and child into another's hands. Occasionally looking through medical books in my free time helps pass the time. His gaze moved to the teacup and dryly coughed once before informing, "I just heard you mention the Wei family Biaomei. You don't have to waste effort on her. Zhen heard that the person she is engaged to isn't in Jing City. Wei Qinshi's card has been blocked by Muhu. She's emperor's relative, I won't waste effort on her." Chu Qingju smiled with a tilted head. "Today, I had the kitchen make a pearl pigeon soup. Emperor has to have a taste." Knowing that his empress was changing the topic, He Hing saw the even brighter smile on her face, and could only smile and shake his head, ordering the servants to serve the meal. The food in the palace on the surface was set down, but the raw materials differed within the standard set down. The little kitchen Chu Qingju had almost equaled the imperial kitchen in terms of product. This was disregarding He Hing, who frequently got the Department of Household Affairs to send things over to Chu Qingju. After the noon meal, He Hing leaned on the recliner as he read, Chu Qingju leaning on him as she played with a jade 9-ring chain. A short while later, she untangled the chain in her hand, yawning as she threw it to one side. She twisted her body to place her head on He Hing's thigh. So boring. He Hing looked at her slightly swelling belly, cautiously putting his hand on top. Occasionally, he could feel the small movements of the little life within. He smiled, asking, "What do you want to play? I'll have them prepare." "Nothing I really want." Chu Qingju's hand moved back and forth on his leg. "Why don't you talk about what you thought when you first saw me? At that time, you were wearing heavy makeup and didn't dare to look at me. I really thought I had married a weak and timid wife." He Hing rested his hand on her back, allowing Chu Qingju to mess around on his leg. "I'm very happy you managed to overcome the poison Feng Shi fed you. Otherwise, I would never know that a man and woman can be together like this." Chu Qingju's hand stilled. She didn't know what to say. A beat later, she asked, "If I hadn't made it through?" He Hing gripped her hand tightly that she felt some pain. "There isn't any more if. The result is that you are here, Zhen is here. This is very good." He Hing placed her hand on his face, sighing, "To have Qingju accompany Zhen, it's Zhen's greatest luck." There was nothing in being alone at the top, so each dynasty, each generation of emperor would have women that they favored. It was only because they couldn't find what they wanted with the bodies of the woman they favored, so they would continue to look for the next one. He knew that the woman lying in his lap was the one he wanted. But, he also knew that in this woman's heart, he wasn't that important. However, they still had a long time, and time would slowly change everything. Therefore, this was very good. Chapter 105 faded halfway through the night. Chu-Ching-ju suddenly woke up from her dreams, the cramping in her legs unbearable, as though something had twisted her foot tendon and was swinging on it. Ching-ju, what is it? He suddenly awoke from his slumber and saw that the forehead of the person beside him was dotted with sweat. From the light casted by a candle in the corner of the room, he saw that even the colors of her lips had changed, and paled himself, hurriedly calling for a servant. A commotion later, Chu-Ching-ju's cramps disappeared under the massage of the pregnancy mama. She rubbed her forehead tiredly. She felt that she was very drowsy but couldn't fall asleep. Emperor, please don't worry. When a woman is pregnant, hand and foot cramps may occur. If care is taken with the diet, it will subside in a while. The pregnancy mama saw that the emperor didn't have a happy expression and informed cautiously, normally, if someone massages nyang-nyang, it can help relieve the symptoms. Heng's face cleared slightly. Seeing Chu-Ching-ju's tired state, he ordered, Jun will get the nurses from the Imperial Hospital for this matter. You can all leave. He didn't understand medicine but knew that a person had many acupuncture points. If a wrong spot was pressed, it was deleterious to the mother and the fetus. The pregnancy mama, Mu Jin and the others carefully left. After leaving the room, they finally took a breath. The emperor's expression had been very dark, so frightening that they didn't dare to breathe. Can't sleep. Heng kept on patting Chu-Ching-ju's back and seeing that she didn't fall asleep, he asked, still uncomfortable. Chu-Ching-ju shook her head and changed positions. Can't sleep. What is it? Heng pulled the blanket up and wrapped it more securely around the two of them. I'm not having morning court tomorrow so we can talk now. Tomorrow, it was the start of sealing the pen and the break from court. In reality, Heng still had a pile of things to do but to comfort the person beside him, of course he wouldn't say those things. Chu-Ching-ju felt that she didn't have any desire to talk, but looking at the other's spirited state, she could only respond, talk about what? Anything will do. Heng forced down the urge to open his mouth in a yawn, like your childhood, or what things you like. Chu-Ching-ju stared for a beat before sighing. I don't remember much from my childhood. Before, I didn't have many chances to leave the compound. When I grew older, only Jiomu would take me to meet others, but I couldn't spend all my time with Jiomu. The relationship between Tian family and the Chu family became antagonistic after that. So from birth, life was like that, there's not much to talk about. Liang Shi was truly horrid. Heng lovingly ran his fingers through Chu-Ching-ju's hair behind her back. Xiandi hadn't done many things for me. This entire life, the only good things he did are two matters. One is you, the other is the succession edict. I can't compare to the succession edict. In this world, this is only one succession edict, but there are hundreds of thousands of women. Chu-Ching-ju squirmed and changed her position to put her head at Heng's neck. Liang Shi was horrid, but my father was the true culprit. My mother died of unknown causes and father was in a rush to welcome a new wife. If it wasn't for Jojo and his family, I'm afraid that even my dowry would have been very meager. If I really had married that shoddily, then what reputation would I have had with the imperial house? The family of the Duke of Zhongyi is very good, Heng said a beat after hearing her words. In this world, there are men like your father, but there are couples who are together for their lives. Chu-Ching-ju's lips curled. Was Heng telling her that he wasn't the same kind of person as the Duke of Changde? There are women in this world who like hearing pretty words, but there are also those who only see reality. She put a hand on his chest. Coincidentally, I am the latter. I don't like hearing what people say, only like seeing what people do. Doing is better than seeing. The smile on Heng's face grew wide. I'm very comforted by how smart Ching-ju is. He was afraid that she wouldn't like to hear him, and also wouldn't like to see what he did. On the 29th day of the 12th month, the court pen was sealed. Except for those who had to be on duty in each ministry, the other people had gone home to pass the year. But even so, those officials weren't truly idle. They were proactively finding out whose family received gifts from the emperor and which families were able to attend the imperial family's year-end banquet. This was the first year since the new emperor had ascended the throne. Those who received gifts from the emperor meant that those people, at the very least, had caught the emperor's eyes. It would have been strange if no one in Jing cared about them. So from the 29th to the 30th day, there were gifts coming out of the palace. Those who received them were ones such as Qing Wang and the Duke of Zhongyi. Aside from the luck character and spring couplets from the emperor, there were gifts from the two empress dowagers and the empress. Some, such as the Right Minister Right, Ning Wang, Rui Wang, and Minster Luo, also received some gifts. As for the others' families, some people received the emperor's character, some received the empress gifts, but they didn't have the honor to receive gifts from the four big personages. However, at this year-end, all the officials in Jing City understood one thing. That was, you could only eat if you followed the emperor. The year banquet was on the 30th day. Other than the members of the imperial house, only families who had a first-rank title were lucky enough to be able to enter the palace to enjoy the banquet, such as the Duke of Zhongyi and the two heads of the two Empress Dowagers' paternal families. Chu Qingju and He Hing sat together at the very front. Due to her pregnancy, she didn't drink any wine. In front of her was a phoenix returning to the nest soup. Basically, it was a chicken stuffed inside a pig's stomach and then cooked using an old pot, but the taste was good and fitting to drink in the winter. The people below knew that the Empress was pregnant and no one was foolish enough to toast her. So halfway through the banquet, she had been idle. The Empress' belly is so round and smooth. Chen Fu thinks this child must be male. Qin Bailu raised a wine cup, stood and said to Chu Qingju, Chen Fu toasts Nyang Nyang, and wishes that Nyang Nyang will give birth to a son soon and stays young forever. The Empress was already pregnant. Wishing for her to give birth to a son soon, wasn't it not appropriate? Luo Wenyao furrowed her brows, and followed in standing and raising her wine cup. Chen Fu wishes Empress to stay healthy and have a good year. Chu Qingju grasped the wine cup from her side. Mu Jin poured her a cup of water. She raised the cup towards the two people, many thanks to both daimai. Since I can't drink now, I have to use water in place of wine to thank both of you. He Hing placed a duck's tongue into Chu Qingju's bowl, smiling as he declared, everyone here isn't an outsider, so Jin isn't afraid everyone will laugh. Jin and Empress are both young and feel the sex doesn't matter. Everyone followed in agreeing, and along the way, praised both Emperor and Empress. The major idea was that no matter if it was an imperial son or daughter, they would certainly be the recipients of Emperor and Empress good genes, and in the future, would become one that would stun the world. Qin Bailu couldn't believe that the emperor would so brazenly protect Chu Qingju to the point that he would say in front of all those people that he didn't care whether it was a boy or girl. Did the emperor not want someone to carry down the line? In the future, Zhen and Empress will have many children. To guess whether each one is a boy or girl, that would be Zhen and Empress bringing trouble upon ourselves. He Hing roared with laughter, self-mockingly adding, Zhen doesn't want to go to such trouble. Everyone naturally followed in laughing, but their hearts were scared witless. What the emperor just said, it seemed to mean that he was only going to have children with the Empress only. It must be that they heard wrong. Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow at He Hing. Seeing he was smiling as he listened to the flattery of the people below, she lowered her head to continue drinking soup. Wei Qingyi and He Qi sat together. She looked dazedly at Chu Qingju dressed in a purple wide-sleeved dress embroidered with 100 birds bowing to a phoenix. She couldn't believe her eyes and ears. The emperor was really willing to favor only one woman, and was even willing to have only her have children. She thought about the tongfang that the other officials had sent over after they returned to court. Even though she had shared in the hardships with Wang Yi and Wang Yi treated her much more closely, didn't he still take the women that others gave as tongfang? Was it really true that this world had a man that was faithful, and this man was the emperor as well? Wei Qingyi slowly took her gaze back. Strangely, her gaze fell on Qin Bailu. Qin Bailu's expression wasn't well. Rui Wang beside her didn't seem to pay any attention to her. The two sat at a two-person table, but their atmosphere wasn't any different from strangers. It was no wonder then that Qin Bailu was that jealous of Chu Qingju. As a woman, she could understand what the other thought, even she was slightly jealous of the empress. She had the status, she would almost have a child, and she even had the fidelity of her husband. And this woman who had everything didn't even need to be kind or generous, didn't need a high birth but still lived better than all of them. What are you looking at? He Qi pulled her sleeve under the table, warning in a small voice, don't copy Lao San's Wang Fei's stupidity. I heard the emperor doesn't like that one and already bestowed down a few beauties to Rui Wang Fu. Wei Qingyi's heart jumped. Her brow creasing, she asked, wasn't it said that the emperor didn't keep any of the female candidates? He didn't keep any, but that doesn't mean that he can't bestow them to other people. He Qi swirled the wine cup in his hand, flicking a look in the direction of He Yuan. Lao San was too arrogant in his conduct, but that one of his isn't a peaceful one. I heard that in the past, she had done many things to offend the empress. The way the emperor dotes on the empress, would he spare that one of Lao San's? The emperor wouldn't. Wei Qingyi's tongue twisted. The emperor wouldn't manage such matters. Don't see only his appearance, he's ruthless. He Qi pushed his voice so quiet that only the two of them could hear, how that Chu Ce phase of Lao San passed away, there's a lot that went on there. Wei Qingyi gripped her wine cup tighter. Then a woman who could keep a man like that in the palm of her hand, how scary was she? In that instant, the look that Wei Qingyi gave Chu Qingju was as though she was seeing a devastatingly beautiful demoness. Chu Qingju didn't know that she had been leveled up to demoness. She gave a yawn and ate the fruits that had been cut up. She occasionally exchanged words with the noblewomen as the year banquet slowly came to a conclusion. At precisely midnight, the fireworks exploded outside the hall, dyeing half of the hall red. Chu Qingju looked outside the hall and managed to see one of the fireworks burst, impossibly beautiful. Like it? He Hing reached out a hand to her, I'll accompany you outside to see. Chu Qingju gave him her hand. The two walked out of the hall holding hands and stood at the tall stage outside the hall. They watched as bud after bud of fire bloom and then wither, beautiful as though it was a dream. Behind the two were the people who had come to attend the banquet. Everyone saw the hands of the emperor and empress entwined together. Under the fireworks, the figures of the two were like a painting. Wei Qingyi stood next to He Qi. Her gaze was fixed on the emperor and empress hands that hadn't let go from beginning to end. She seemed to once again see the last evening of the year 1 year ago, as Chu Qingju, clad entirely in red, walked down step by step from those stairs, and the emperor, still a Wang Yi then, couldn't resist going forward to support Chu Qingju. It seemed that she had never forgotten that scene, and it was deeply embedded in her heart. The fireworks then, it was still as bright and attractive as today, but what she could remember was the hand the emperor couldn't help but reach out. Maybe some things were faded. Like her and He Qi, Chu Qingju and the emperor, Qin Bailu and Rui Wang, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.